Welcome back, folks, to the Get a Grip on Life podcast. Thank you for listening to this show. If you're mowing your lawn or driving your car, remember, if you've ever considered making some digital media of your own or starting a podcast, go to getagripstudios.com. That's getagripstudios.com. Welcome to the Get a Grip on Life podcast, Dr. Joy.
Hi, I'm so excited to be your guest today. Thank you for asking me to be on your show.
Where are you right now?
I am in Douglas, Georgia. That's where my home is, and so I'm actually there. And it's a place that I really, really love. I live on a beautiful lake here in South Georgia, so I have a beautiful view out my window. And it's always nice to be able to do my radio shows and be guests and things like that while I'm at home. I started doing a lot of radio shows as a guest when my husband got very, very sick. And so it's been nice to be able to do that. With the books that I had at one time, I was able to travel and do book signings and things like that. And then he became very, very sick. So it required that I stay home 24/7 to be his caregiver. And when he passed away last year, I began, starting back doing the radio shows and things again. So I'm excited about being able to talk about my work again and explain to people what's important to me and why my research has really driven me since I was a child to try to talk about some of these things that we're seeing happen today. So it's a wonderful experience to be able to do this in your home setting.
Are you a Christian?
Yes, I am. I've been a Christian really since I guess I joined the church at age 11. But my parents and my grandparents were both very much into Christianity and Southern Baptist. And when I was born, I spent the first week of my life, I was in a church. So I've been going to church a very, very long time now, and do enjoy it because I absolutely enjoy different facets of it. I'm a musician, so I play piano, I play drums, I have done praise and worship, I write Christian music. And so it's always been really important to me. I speak in churches, I have done workshops in churches, and I just love what I do, and I've really loved it since I was a child. I had a strange dream when I was 6 years old about the end of days, and it kind of set me on a path that was very unusual, I guess, as a young child, wanting to find answers to what the dream meant to me as a person. And it led me down a path that now that's what I talk about all the time. And of course, I always wanted to be involved with people. So when I was working on my educational degrees, my intent, my first 2 years were to be an attorney to help people. And then I decided that I wanted to get into coaching and working with people. And so I changed and majored in health and physical education because I enjoyed being physical. I'm an athlete myself, even still today. And I did a lot of training of Special Olympians for even world events. So that allowed me to touch a lot of people's lives. And then I worked on my master's in guidance counseling and psychology because I was interested in the aspect of how we think and what we think. And then I went on and got my doctorate because I was interested in administration and really looking after people. And I wanted to be able to do research on my own. And that taught me how to do that and how to publish that and how to do what I do. So I've been fortunate now to have a good number of books. My research is, of course, nonfiction, but I try to write it in a way that a 12-year-old could understand it as well as a PhD. So my intent is to bring certain things to the table that some people just don't want to talk about in churches. And I found that very frustrating as a young person when I had a lot of questions about the end of days, and people would say, well, it's not meant for us to know, or it's symbolic, or it's not something to worry about now. So I have taken on the responsibility for myself throughout my life to want to know the truth. And when I would ask Sunday school teachers questions or the pastor questions and they couldn't answer it, or they had that, well, it's not time for us to know, or it's a symbol of something that we will find out maybe later. I always felt like that when a creator created the world, that he created everything and that everything's here. Everything we need to know about, everything was was spot on. So I began to do the research on my own. Even while I was going to college, I was fortunate enough that I had several professors that allowed me to talk about the end of days and what we might live through if the book of Revelation or the book of the Old Testaments that talk about the end of days, like Daniel and some of the other books that are there, that I could get a grip on what that meant for a person to be living during that time. And so I was fortunate. I had several professors that allowed that to happen, and I did a lot of thesis on that, and so that allowed me to start my books.
So if
Really,
I may ask a question, so looking at you, you look like a typical, not typical, sorry, but like a lovely Southern woman from the U.S. Maybe you'd have a cup of tea with her, or whatever, and it would be enjoyed, and you talk about the picnic. But you have a much more serious message for people. And do you believe that we are living in the end of days right now?
I do, and that's the thing that's been, I guess, most important to me since I was a child, to know why the path in my life started with such a dream, and I couldn't explain it, and nobody could explain it because what I saw was total annihilation. And of course, I'm old, and back when I was a young child at 6 years of age, there were no, movies on TV about the end of time, and there was no movies that were like the movies we have today, like Armageddon and things like that, that could have influenced me to have had and seen something of that magnitude. So
What did you see?
uh, it was just total annihilation, and it was annihilation in such a way that I've never seen Hollywood perform it on any movie like what I saw. And the sound, that there was no sound, and it was just a deafening silence that was beyond comprehension. Um, it was in such a way, and of course, it took me years of trying to take, what I saw and try to put it in perspective, because the only blocks that were literally standing were these huge megalithic stones that, as a child, I mean, the only blocks that I ever saw were little cement blocks about like this and about like this, that we might have, built little shelters and stuff with, or under the bottom of homes growing up in South
Mm.
Georgia, in the early 60s. So, I'd never seen stones that were huge like that, and literally jagged and blown apart. And so it was only after years of trying to put the pieces together and asking questions at Sunday school. My Sunday school teachers would go to my mother and my grandmother and go, "Where does she come up with these questions?" Because they couldn't answer them. And so, we didn't have the internet. If I'd had internet back then where I could have gone on and said, "Look, I want to see what the big stones look like," we didn't see anything like that. Only after I got in school, and our poor little library was a very small library because it's a little South Georgia rural library. But I used to go in there all the time and try to find books that would kind of give me an idea, like, what was this? And the first book that I ran across that had anything similar to what I felt like was something like I had seen was, I was in a Rexall drugstore, and there was a little. That's how you found books at that day. They were on like a little turn thing, and my mother was paying for a prescription, and I'm sitting there turning the book stand, looking at books, because I always read, always read. From the time I was really little, I loved to read. So I'm spinning the little book thing around, and this book called Late Great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey is, about so high from me. And of course, I immediately took it down, and I'm thinking, oh, that's kind of a weird title, and kind of flipped it over and flipped through it and whatever. And I saw that it was talking about some weird things that I felt like I had maybe seen or knew about. So I begged my mother to buy the book, and she's like, "What in the world do you want this book for?" And I'm like, "Please, mother, please, I'm begging." So she buys it for me, and I take it home that afternoon and totally read the entire book. because the first time in my life, I was like, somebody gets this. Somebody understands exactly what I've been asking questions about and what I think that I saw as a child in this dream in the middle of the night. So that made me go to the book of Revelation and sit down and just really read it, and not read it with what I had already heard. I'm not one of these kind of people, when somebody would tell me something, just to accept what it was face value. If I'm going to find out, and if it's for me, I want the truth. So I sat down quietly by myself, and I would usually go off. So whenever I would read, I would go off in another part of the house that was actually a game room setting, because I played the drums, and my my parents wanted the drums away from the house. But I would go out there and I would crawl up on a little couch, and I would sit there and I would read intently, trying to get an understanding. Of course, I was reading stuff in Revelation, and if you've ever read the book of Revelation, it's very confusing because it has all
I read it.
these symbols and things in it. So you have to remember that I'm a 13-year-old kid attempting to read something that is totally, I have no understanding about, other than every now and then at church somebody might touch on the book of Revelation, but they were scared of it because they didn't know how to interpret it. So they might preach hellfire and brimstone, but they didn't really talk about the end of days and what was going to happen and that kind of stuff. They just didn't discuss it. So it became me and the word trying to get this. And as time went on, I began to see more and more things that were similar to what I had seen. And then one day I had a friend that had gone to the Holy Land, and they brought back a book from Israel and Jerusalem. And they said, I know that you love to study this, and I thought you'd like to see it. And so I'm flipping through it, and I see the Wailing Wall. And I'm like, oh my gosh, these are stones that are identical to that it's a child. I've never forgotten. I mean, I can just kind of close my eyes and kind of see these things. And so I was like, for the first time, I realized the hill that I was standing on and how I was looking over that vastness, that was in that area. And that valley, which which I now know is a valley of Megiddo, where the Battle of Armageddon is going to take place. I didn't know that as a child. I had no idea about anything like that. So here I am seeing this. I'm literally seeing it. So it took time for me to get information about what it was that I really saw. And so, I've been fortunate now that we have the internet and things like that and pictures. It just makes it has made it come alive. But what it led me to do was that when I was working on my education, I would go to professors and say, look, I really want to do a paper about, light, about beginning and about end. And of course, these professors would kind of look at me a little bit funny, but they knew that I was serious about what I believed. They knew that this meant something to me. It wasn't like flippant or stupid or whatever, that I really wanted to take, let's say, 3 months to do a thesis or whatever. And I was willing to lay it out and then try to defend it. And I had several professors who said, well, now, Joy, if you decide to do this, then it's important that you understand your grade's going to be based on it. Well, my father was very militaristic. He believed in 100. And if you had a 5 point, like 105 you can make, if I made 104, that was not good enough. And he was paying for my college education. So I didn't really want to go like, okay, professor, I'm willing to take the chance I'm gonna make an F on this paper, on this thesis. And my dad would have been like, oh my gosh, child, we're gonna put you back out there in the tobacco field, and you're gonna be working for the rest of your life. Because I grew up picking cotton, driving tractors. I mean, I was a very, very much a country girl. And so I was like, some people wanted to party, and I'd be like, oh no, you've never been in a tobacco field at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when the sun is beating down on you so hard. You will go to school because you don't want to live like that for the rest of your life. So anyway, I was very serious, is what I'm trying to say, is I was very serious about what I was doing. So when the professor would say, it's going to be your grade, Well, again, there were no internets. I would have to go to the college libraries, which were small too, ask for books that might be somewhere, have to be sent in, and just comb trying to find things to defend what I was saying.
What were you saying?
And what I was saying was that what was going to happen at the end of days would be these kinds of things. There
Tell
would
me.
be pestilences. There would be changes in the sun, moon, and stars. There would be technology that would be beyond anything we had ever dreamed possible. I mean, these were the kinds of things that I was really bringing to the table, that we were actually seeing things that matched in with what the book of Revelation was saying. It was already starting to happen in our world. I didn't ever try to set a date, so to say, like this is going to happen on July the 5th, 2025 or something like that. But what I wanted to show that over the course of time, where we had these things happening, that before that there was not that much happening, and then from this point to this point there was more, and then this point there was more. And what I wanted to show was that as we get closer to the end of days, according to what the book of Revelation is saying, that the things that we know, like earthquakes and hurricanes and tornadoes and floods and pestilences and people having issues with wars and rumors of wars, that where we had them very far apart, that as we move closer to the times now in which we're living, that those things get closer together, there's more of them, and they're more intense. So sure enough, when I would put these papers together, I was talking about a time way before the internet and that kind of stuff. So those papers, I always got really good grades, and they allowed me to defend them in class. And let me just say this: that some of my college friends would be sitting there going, "What?" I mean,
You know what?
because it was
I'm
so
gonna.
odd.
Yeah, it is. It is odd. Like another thing that strikes me as interesting. I'm not going to say it's odd. Was that you had a vision when you were 6 and you never thought
Yes.
forgot it, and it was. Was there ever a point
Oh,
in your life, like your life, when you didn't think about that or wasn't in your mind
I,
that
I
day,
I think that it has always been in the back of my mind,
and you can
because it was
remember this
something.
dream? You can
Oh,
recall this dream.
yes. Close my
Mm.
eyes and remember it. And it was so intense that I went and woke my grandmother, my grandfather, my grandmother. They were in the room above where my sister and I slept.
Hmm.
And my parents lived on the other side of the house, because we were a big farming family, and we all lived in a huge farmhouse. And I got up and woke her up. She was a Sunday school teacher, and I wanted to go to the church at 6 years of age that night. I wanted to go then. I wanted to make sure that God knew that I wanted to be on His side of the ball game, when this came to pass, because I felt like it was so terrible.
Mm.
And of course, she was a grandmother who loved me. I mean, she was everything to me.
Mm.
We shared so much over the years of uh, these feelings that I would have about the intensity of my work and my research. But she was at the understanding that a child at 6 years of age should be more the age of accountability around 12. They kind of saw that as the time when a person makes a decision about their faith and joining
Sure.
the church. They weren't really pushing it down your throat. You need to join the church today and that kind of stuff. It's not like that at all. She wanted me to be very sure, but at the same time, she wanted me to be a child. She saw that this was taking away, maybe where kids could go out and play, instead of me being extrovert, which I am a very extrovert now because I love to talk, but it made me more introverted,
Mm.
because it made me think. I would find myself going,
It sounds
this is going to
terrifying.
happen. What?
It sounds terrifying.
Well, you know, the thing in it that did not make it terrifying was that once I saw all the destruction, everything, thought I was totally alone, that I was seeing this by myself, that there was nothing else left, that literally the destruction and the fire and the destruction, I can't even, it's like beyond, just beyond words. But when I saw the wall and I went running around this jagged wall, there was a man standing there. And I'm, you know, you have to understand, I'm so elated to see another person that I'm like, there's somebody here with me, that I'm not the only one left. And so he's standing there and he has this white like robe on, and he's got this like gold looking thing around his sash way here like this. And he's standing up and he's looking out. The wall is kind of jagged and he's standing up looking out over this jaggedness. He was very tall. Of course, I was a child, so he seemed bigger than life, And when I went running around there and I turned and looked at him and I'm like, I just felt like, oh, it was just, it was the worst fear, like you're talking about at that moment. And then when I saw this person, and then it's like, I'm like, oh, you know, and I'm looking at him and he is standing there and his hair is kind of long. He's got this beard and he's kind of looking out, and he turns and he looks at me, and his eyes were so blue. In fact, I've got a Christian song that I wrote. Your eyes are so blue. It's because of that.
Was
Because
that
of that
was
dream.
that the Lord? Was
His
it Christ? Well, who
It
was
was.
it?
There's no doubt in my mind. There's no doubt in my mind that was Jesus. No doubt in my mind that was Jesus. The eyes were just. I mean, I get chill bumps talking about it, because even when I sing the song that I wrote, most of the time I'll cry because it's like the most blue. It's the most blue you could. There's just not even a blue color that's as beautiful as that blue was. And it was a feeling. It was a feeling like, you're not alone. I'm here. Everything, is going to be okay. It was like it was emanating from him. I could feel it without him touching me. It was like you could just feel it. I'm getting chill bumps. Anyway, you could feel it. And as I'm looking at him, he looks at me, he says, "Do not fear, I am with you always, even unto the end." And the dream ended. So had that not happened, and I had been left with just what I saw, that would have been terrifying,
Hmm.
because it was terrifying.
Okay.
It was, I mean, I get chill bumps. It was the most terrifying thing that a child, if you were ever a child and you got lost from your parents and you
Mhm.
were panicked because you felt like you were alone and you didn't know where anybody was. If you've ever had that experience, it was like that experience time a million
Mhm.
that I was feeling at that moment before I encountered him. And once I encountered him, then when I woke up, I went immediately and got my grandmother, woke her up, wanted to go to the church, wanted to take care of this situation like right now. And she was just trying so hard to comfort me.
Mm.
I mean, she didn't want me to be upset. She
Mm.
didn't want me to live my life being afraid. I mean, that was not what she wanted. She wanted me to have a good childhood like children should have. And I had a wonderful childhood. I mean, I did all kinds of stuff. I was athletic. I made good grades because my dad expected that. Um, so I was very outgoing, but at the same time, there was that element inside of me this is something that is very important. It was
Hmm.
just one of those kinds of things. And of course, throughout my life, I've had other dreams and things that came true that were scary, because I dreamed about people's deaths before they happened and certain things, and then wake up and know what's going to happen, and before you can get it out of your mouth, it's happened, and you're
Did you
seeing it
dream?
like you
Did you
saw it
ever?
in the dream.
Did you dream about me?
Oh, no, no. And people, let me say, when I started having problems like that, people would go, and I would say something like, "Oh, I dreamed about you last night." They say, "Oh, no, no, tell me you didn't dream about me." And so then that unfortunately made me sometimes afraid to tell stuff.
Mm. Let me
And
ask you this. Go ahead. Go ahead. There were times.
there were times that I knew things, that I literally knew things for they were going to happen, and they happened. And they happened
Mm.
exactly like I saw them in the dream. And it would break my heart
Are these
because I
dreams?
couldn't stop it.
Are you using the word dream to describe something that's more being revealed to you in a vision? Are you actually asleep,
I
or
was asleep.
you're
I think
asleep?
I was asleep. I think I was asleep. I don't think it was. that I was awake. Now, I have had situations where, for example, this is an example. One day I was coming home from town, and actually from work in Osceola, where I would work every day, coming back home to Douglas, where I live. And I decided that I needed to go on into Douglas to get gas in my little vehicle. And so as I started over a hill, there was a vehicle, going up the hill in front of me, and I had plenty of time to get around them and pass them and go on. And as I'm starting around them, I get almost to the front of their vehicle and I hear a clear voice, just clear voice. The front left tire is about to go out. Stop. And I heeded to what I heard, and I slammed on brakes, and that car's left front tire blows out and sends him across the road. If I had still been where I was at, they would have come right into me and we would have went right into the ditch.
Mm.
And probably there's a possibility I could have been killed. So, I mean, I've had things like that happen where it's an audible voice,
Mm-hmm.
you hear it, and then it happens. And so I've learned now that if I have something like that happen to me, I heed to whatever it's told me, because it in many, many situations has been what would be later confirmed. And just like that, I mean, what would have been the chances of me even thinking that? I
Mm-hmm.
would have never thought that. I mean, that wasn't something that I would be thinking about. So these little things have happened through my life that I think have been ways to confirm what my path was. And when I worked for many, many years with the handicap for years and years, and I loved working with the handicap. That was one of my favorite jobs ever. Um, the entire time, I would go to a conference table and be talking about something, and somebody would bring up something that was on the news, and I would say, "Oh, this relates to so and so and so and so, and that means so and so, and this guy's going to be doing that, and this political person's," and people would be going like, "I never knew you knew all about that stuff." It was something that I did on my own. So then my mother got cancer, and I had to stop and really take care of her. Um, and so it was almost like God put me in prison. And my mother used to say that really my life reminded her of kind of Paul, that God had to pull me out of what I was doing to make me focus on what he had planned for me. And so when she would be taking chemo all day, I would be sitting with her and I would be reading all these books. And then one day, I felt the call to write a book, and not to really say anything to anybody about it. It was just a call that I knew God was saying it's time to write the book. And I went up to my library and pulled my books off the shelf, that I had already read, and I began writing. My first book it's called Antichrist, the Cloned Image of Jesus Christ. And back in 1997, it's been redone. It's a new book now. It's been updated and revised. But I started writing that book, and that was when I knew that I was moving from the work that I thought I was supposed to do into the work that I feel like God had prepared me for since the day I was 6 years old.
What is
So,
God like?
every time that I have encountered anything that I felt like was in connection to him, the dream itself and what he looked like, very human. I mean, he looked like
So
he actually looks like
we are created in
we
the
are
image
created
and
in his
the
image. Yes, we are. And that one of the things that I talk about in a lot of my books is about the Shroud of Turin. And
Can I ask you another
the
question
Shroud of
about God? Can I
yes.
ask you another question? And this is not meant to be in any way like, I'm sure that God reveals himself to each in his own way. But was God a white guy? Was he a white man?
He was his skin looked like if you had a tan.
Okay.
It was not like he was oriental or he was black. It was just he had a tan, and his hair was kind of a dishwater
Okay.
blonde, not like white or like my hair or anything blonde. It was more like a dishwater blonde. His beard was the same. His eyes were, like I'm telling you, they were bluer than blue. It's the only
Mm.
way I can say. If you just take Paul Newman's eyes, I mean, I'm trying to think of somebody who's got really blue eyes.
Mm.
Um, but Paul
Sure.
Newman had beautiful blue eyes. If you just took and magnified his eyes 1,000 times, you might be able to get the blue that was so pretty. It was just unreal. And it was in his face was, almost like what he was looking at, there was a sadness, when he was looking out over that wall, there was this sadness, like, you know, it's just, but then when he turned to look at me, there was just this emanating love that was just, oh my gosh, I'm like, I was so glad to see. I mean, honestly, it was like, you just can't, there's not even words to describe what that felt like.
Do you
But
believe
it
that?
was, it was like,
Let me
he
ask you
just look
something.
at you and you could feel his compassion.
Hmm.
It was like, wow, you just could feel it.
Yeah, I know what you
You
mean.
could feel it.
Hmm. Do you believe that the Antichrist is a human being amongst us right now?
I do. I do. And that's what some of my work is really showing. My interest, I guess my interest started with the Shroud of Turin because of what I'd seen.
Like I'll
Okay.
be hon- I'll be
I
honest.
really,
I'll be honest with you. I'm not. I don't think you're crazy, or some people out there probably accuse you of all kinds of things. But I'm a doubter. Okay, I'm not.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? I understand where you're coming from. So, but you believe that the Antichrist, is he an American? Is he with us now? Do you know who it is?
I fully believe that. Let me kind of give some background.
Sure.
When I saw what I fully believe was Jesus at that age and
Hmm.
what he looked like, then I always had a picture in my mind of what he looked like. And in
Hmm.
I guess about 1970 something, it could have been as late as 1978. My dad was a very much a historian. He loved different kinds of books and stuff. He knew so much about everything. And one day he brought in this book to me, and it was a magazine, and it had a picture of the Shroud of Turin in it.
Hmm.
And he said, "I got something, girl." He always called me girl. He said, "I got something, girl, I want to show you." And I was like, "You do?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Take a look at this." And he turned it around, and it was the complete thing of the Shroud of Turin, the
Hmm.
complete frontal image of a man. And I looked at that picture and I'm like, "Oh my goodness." I'm like, I took it and I was looking at it and I was like, looking at it and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I've seen this guy before." I'm like, and I'm looking at my dad and he's kind of looking at me and I'm starting to kind of cry and I'm like holding on to this picture and I'm like, "It's him." And I'm looking at my dad. I'm like, it's him. And so my dad goes, "It's him. What are you talking about?" I said, "I've seen this man. I've seen this man. I've seen this man. This is the man that was in my," I just kept on. So this is the man that was in my dream. This is the man that was in my dream. So I, from the time I ever saw the Shroud of Turin, I believed it was real. Now, from the time that the Stewart Committee started doing their research on it, and I talk about this, and of course, that is the most researched relic in all of history. Um,
I'm looking
there
at
have
it right
been
now.
doubts. Yeah, there's been doubts. There's been speculation about, was it a medieval painting? Was it a forgery? Was it something that Michelangelo or Da Vinci or somebody that had great capabilities of painting could have painted on a cloth and made it look like it was the
Mm.
crucified image of Jesus Christ? Okay, but the I trace the shroud from the time that it was left there in the tomb when Jesus resurrected. I trace it all the way through the wall of Edessa. It was called the cloth of Edessa. And then I take it and bring it up through where it was owned by different kings and the Knights Templar, and how they were able to secure that from the wall of Edessa. And then how it got into the hands of the different people, Charney and Savoy and those kinds of people, and then how at the very end, when this king of Italy was really dying, he bequeathed it to um, the Pope, and it's been kept there in Turin, Italy. That's why it's called the cloth, the cloth in Turin, the Shroud of Turin. It's because it's been in Turin, Italy for quite some time now. And of course, it's encased in a beautiful case that's filled with gases to protect it and whatever. But the thing about it is, the image was always in my mind the same as the image that I saw. And so I saw this image when I was 6 in my dream.
Hmm.
And then I didn't see this cloth with this image until 75, 76, 77, sometime after, I graduated from high school.
Hmm.
So we're talking about a long number of years that
Have
I'd
you
never
been to
seen
Turin to
anything
see the
similar.
shroud? Have you been to Turin?
No, my husband got to see it. He traveled the world with his job, and he got to see it. But I've never had the opportunity. Like I say, when I first started doing the research on all this, my mother became very sick, and so I was her caregiver for about 10 years. And then my husband became very
But it
sick
sounds
due
like,
to
but
a
it
flu
sounds like
shot, and I took him.
you don't need to see it. You've already seen it.
Well, the thing about it, and thank goodness for things like the internet.
Mm.
And then, of course, I'm friends with people who do research on this shroud. In fact, I got about, I guess, 5 or 6 new updates on the processing of what they're doing right now with the shroud this past week, just to keep me informed about it because of my research in it as well. So the thing about it is that I've never doubted it. And I think that what we're seeing, even when the Pope that's there now, Pope Francis, when he took over within a couple of months, he actually proclaimed that the testing that they were doing on it had really proved that it was from the time of Jesus. But they had tried to misrepresent carbon dating and some of the things that were involved in it, to the point that they were making it appear that it was more medieval, and it's definitely not a medieval cloth. I mean, now we know from the carbon dating was skewed, that they took it from a part of the cloth that had actually been replaced. And now that you've got people who do material analysis and stuff like that, the material that was taken from the cloth itself, according to biblical scripture, was complete linen. And you know this because in the belief, they never mixed like wool with linen. Everything was a pure
Let me ask you
piece of
something.
cloth.
I want to get like, so you're into the science. Let's just say that I believe
Mhm.
you. Okay. So what we're seeing here is, who was the first person to remove the Shroud of Turin and store it as a relic? Was it Peter? Was it Mary Magdalene? Who was the first person to store the shroud as a relic? And then who did they pass it on to next? And how did it get?
Well, I did a whole book kind of like on all that kind of stuff. Joseph of Arimathea was the
Mhm.
person who owned that particular piece of cloth, and he was wrapped in it, and it was supposed to be. He was enveloped in it. In other words, the cloth was long and it was laid down, and his body was put in it, and his cloth was wrapped around it and laid back down on top of it.
Mhm.
So when he resurrected through it, it left an image, which I fully believe was pure
Hmm.
light. And I think that it's going to be what's going to actually come out. Some of the
Hmm.
research that I'm looking at now is showing that there was a type of energy that went through that cloth, and it left this image. Let's say his back is on the back side and the front is his front. So you know, when you fold the cloth out, you can see the front image and you can see his back image. And every aspect of that man, is crucifixion wise, is correct. I mean, everything according to what scripture says that happened to Jesus is absolutely on that cloth.
Hmm.
And so I believe that they took that cloth
So
and
the
that they kept it.
holes in the hands, the pierced side.
And
uh,
and the interesting thing is where a lot of people will say, well, it was in his hand. We know
Was it
from
in his
Christian, and I
wrist?
had already studied that. It's in
Yeah.
his wrist, and it's right in this area where there's a hole that goes through
Right.
your hand. And you have to. The reason is, if you were to drive a nail in this part of your hand and you were to be hanging from a cross, that would strip it out of your hand. In other
Sure.
words, you could not hang like that. And we know he hung like that. But if you put it through this little hole right here,
Mm.
you can't pull through it. In other words, it's got you, you're hanging from that area.
Wow.
And on the shroud, it shows that the hands are like this on the shroud, and you can see where the nail holes went down through that particular area.
Okay.
And
So,
then in his feet, the same way, there was an area on the feet that had to be just right for him to be able to
sure.
hang like that.
I'm on my edge of my seat still. I want to know you to tell me about the Antichrist and how why it is that you believe so strongly that he's a human being amongst us now. It's like the opposite of the word made flesh, I guess. It's like
Well,
the evil
we were
made
we were
flesh, or what is it? The
well.
darkness made
You have
flesh?
What happens is when I went back and started looking at what could an antichrist be, how could an antichrist come to power, how could somebody in our lifetime ever rule over us and we would not know that he was a bad guy?
Mhm.
Because I mean, everybody in history has always said, like Mussolini, Hitler, Nero. There's always been these people that were evil looking and evil minded, and they did terrible things. And people were, over the course of history, pointed their fingers at those people because of that. But I found it that I've always believed that the end of the story started in the beginning. And when I looked at the Garden of Eden and I saw that there was a tree of life and there was a tree of good and evil, the knowledge of good and evil. This meant that the tree of life was a tree perfect unto itself that only gave perfection in that area. And all the trees that were made in the garden were made to produce seed after their kind. So an apple tree only gave out apples, an orange tree only gave out oranges. Those trees were able to be eaten from. The tree of knowledge and the tree of life were something that was a little bit different. They weren't feeding you as the food or the fruit. But every tree in that garden was unto itself one thing. But the tree of knowledge of good and evil was a tree of mixed information, something mixed, good and evil. Everything should either be all evil or all good. It should not have been a mixture between the two. And when I saw that Eve was confused by that in the garden and partook of it after she had even been told not to, she was not afraid of it. There was something that drew her there that made her not afraid to partake from that tree.
What was that?
So I I believe that it was the charisma of using the word of God, or using God in such a way that you thought it was good. You believed it, you were not afraid of it. I mean, when people talk about
Okay, can I ask you a
the
question, a
serpent,
specific question? Yeah. So is the
uh-huh,
serpent Satan, or is he not? Say, or is it not
the
Satan?
serpent, the serpent was definitely Satan, but the
Okay.
serpent is not what we've been taught was a snake on the ground, like a rattlesnake.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
not talking about that kind of reptile.
I want to
We're
ask you another
talking about
question. But
serpent.
the serpent didn't lie to Eve. He told Eve the truth.
He told Eve in a twisted. He took what God had said and he twisted it just a tad. Just a tad. And that's where I began to see that at the end of days, if there is going to be an antichrist, he won't be like a Hitler. He won't be like a Mussolini. He won't be like a Nero. He's got to almost emulate what God is, or how God was, because that's how if you think about your best friend, you trust them beyond words. You tell them things you probably never tell anybody else. The most evil genius is the person that can make you believe that they like you and everything's going to be okay, for you to succumb to whatever with them. And it's almost like, I get you close enough and then I've got you trapped.
Hmm.
And that's where the evil genius comes in of an antichrist. It's not like I'm out here going, I'm the mean guy, I'm doing mean things, I'm whatever. I'm a good guy. I'm doing good things. I'm going to do these things because it's going to help people. So that was the first thing that I learned by going to the beginning, because the Revelation says in Book of Revelation that the serpent was in the beginning. And of course, your extra books outside the Bible, like the Book of Enoch, talk about the days when Satan was Lucifer. He was the number one angel. I mean, he was kind of like over the other angels. So he was a created being, but he was next to God and wanted to be like God. Of course, we know that when he tried to do that, then he was thrown out of heaven, and then the angels that believed and followed after him were thrown to the earth as well. So they've been with us from day one, you know. So it's not like
Have you
they aren't
seen
here.
Satan?
I've never seen Satan.
Do you think he embodies himself the same way Christ does? I mean, if you look at
I
Christian
think,
scriptures, it's the
I think,
Word made flesh, right? Is there the
yes,
embodiment of evil in flesh?
I think so. And I think that, you know, when we are told when Jesus was here and walked the earth, that, you know, one of the first things that he did was cast out demonic beings from a person. And
Okay, yeah,
those beings actually spoke to Jesus. They knew him when the other people didn't know that he was the Son of God. They knew he
sure.
was the Son of God and specifically said, "Why have you come before the time?" You know, they didn't want to suffer death at that moment. They were allowed to run into the swine, and the swine, you know, went into the
Run off the
water
cliff.
and they
Yeah,
drowned.
sure.
So that tells you that those beings are here, that Christ talked to them,
Have you ever
that
been
they
spoken
talked
to by
back.
demon? Have you ever spoken to have demons ever spoke to you?
No, I've never had a demonic entity ever speak, you know, to me, but I have done case studies and been a part of exorcisms that I've seen that those beings were removed.
And what did you?
And
How did you know they
I
were
have,
removed?
because when it happens, you see the difference between a person that's a one way become a person totally another way. Your people who are medians, who like in the Bible, like the witch of Endor,
Hmm.
when she sat on the oracle site, when King Saul came to her, he wanted Samuel to be conjured up. The Bible tells us the witch of Endor was able to do that. That Samuel was
Hmm.
conjured up. That Saul did have that, you know, whatever relationship
Was it
talking with the
Samuel though?
person.
Was it Samuel that was
I
conjured up, or was it an evil
I
spirit?
think I think that what happens when you do something like that there are spirits, what they call familiar spirits. And you have to be very careful about that. And I think that's why the Bible is trying to show us those kinds of things, is that if
Hmm.
you participate in that, then these spirits are here. Because you hear people lots of times say, well, I had this person come to me or that person come to me. You have to be very careful because they are tricksters. And
Hmm.
that's what Christ was trying to show, that they can possess a person, they can rule over a person, they can oppress a person. You know, they are very real. It's no different than the book of Job and how Satan had the power to kill Job's family. He
Hmm.
had the power in the air. He had the power
Job is a
over the destruction.
scary, scary story, actually. Yeah,
It
I
is,
mean,
and it's of a man that was totally was a pure man, pure of God, truly wanting to do it the
sure.
right way, and literally God allowed Job that test by Satan. So we know that Satan
Well, not
has
only
this
that, like
great
another, throw
power.
another one. Well, never mind that. Like, think about this. Think about the story of Abel and Cain, or Cain and Abel, right?
Yes,
So Cain is maligned by God because he doesn't make the right sacrifices, right? To God. He's not making the right sacrifices, whatever that is. And it's not really clear what it is that Cain is doing wrong. And Abel finds God's favor because he is making the right sacrifices, whatever that is. He's a shepherd, Cain's a farmer, whatever it is. But what's interesting and scary about Cain and Abel, and the same thing about Job, what's interesting to me is that even if you make all the right sacrifices, even if you find favor with God, you still may be beaten to death by your brother in a field.
that's right. Yeah, the
Like,
thing
that's
that we have to
scary,
always
man. Like,
well, the thing we have to
that's a
always remember
scary
is
message. You read that to kids and you say, what does this story mean? Well, it means that, you can find God's favor, but sometimes even when you find God's favor, he won't stop the person that doesn't find his favor from murdering you.
And that's the thing that I have a lot of people who don't want to believe, want to have questions about. The thing that we forget is this. The Bible tells us that it rains on the just and the unjust. The other thing is that we are living in a fallen world. Had that been in paradise and had they not ever encountered and participated with the serpent, with the tree of knowledge of good and evil, then it would have never happened. So the moment that we were put into the world as walking through this world, and the Bible tells us, we are really just passing through, we have to make the choices every day as to who we will serve. And you're going to serve one or two people. You're going to either serve good or you're going to serve evil. And even if you try to do the good and evil, then you're still on the evil side. You either got to be good, or if you try to play good and evil, you're going to be on the evil side, because the knowledge of good and evil is a mixture. And when God created what he created, everything was to be after its own kind and pure in its own way. And there was no mixing involved in it. So, in cases like, people will be like, why did a child get sexually abused? And why was this kid killed? And why, we don't understand that. And there's no way to understand it other than, I believe that conception starts at the moment that the sperm hits the egg. And now, science has proven that when it does, that there's an electrical spark that happens. And of course, I've studied cloning, and cloning, you can take a cell of any person and hollow out a woman's egg and put that cell in it, but you have to electrify it to make it start dividing. So if that's the case, when that sperm hits the egg, there is kind of a little atomic explosion
Mhm.
that starts the process working. And when that happens, I believe that you're already, because the law of thermodynamics specifically tells us that once energy is made, that you can never destroy it. So in other words, like
But you,
ice, we can take
but
ice and change it around, but it's still
I want to
H2O.
change back topics. I want to change back topics to the scariness of Job and the story of Cain and Abel, and back to this idea of good and knowledge of good and evil. And I want to ask you a question, but I want to tell you something first. So, you ever meet a lot of people that say, "I don't believe in God," right?
Right.
And you say, well, okay, why? Because I think certainty in atheism is really illogical. Like someone that says to you that I'm 100% sure that God doesn't exist, that's someone that's not really logical, breaking things
Right.
down. I understand agnosticism very well. Like I'm not sure
Yes.
either
Yeah.
way. But the idea that uh, um, I don't know how to express this the right way, but that um, this idea that humans are equally imbued with good and evil, and that the
Hmm.
world happens to you, is
Hmm.
in all the books of the Bible, right? There's never a point in the Bible when God says, if you choose to worship me, everything is going to be go. Well, I guess he does say that at some point places in the Bible, but even the parable of the talents, there's this
Hmm.
idea of a vicious world, right?
Hmm.
That God is in, and it's nuanced and it's difficult to understand for people that God is not here to guarantee you will live without emotional pain or that you will not
Right.
experience tragedy in your life. Life is a
Right.
tragedy. That's what it is, in a sense. Do you agree with that?
Yes. Yes, it is, and it's
And do
unfortunate.
you not
Like I
agree that
said,
that's the message of the Bible in a way? Like even Christ
is
is
it?
crucified. Like we
That's right,
crucify the Son of God. I mean,
and
that's
we had to
crazy.
do that, but it had to be done to replace what happened in the garden. It had to come to pass. That's what the curse was all about in the garden. It had to flow like it did with him as a pure lamb to sacrifice to break the bonds of death. You cannot break, in other words, death. We're all born into a sinful world. We're going to sin. It's in our nature. We can't escape that on our own. There's nothing that you and I can do that's good enough. In other words, people who say that I've got to be so good to get into heaven, you can't be totally perfect in every aspect of your life. But once you choose to follow Jesus and you feel the pull of the Holy Spirit to make that change, then you will live and seek him in such a way that you're constantly looking as to, I want to live my life like he was and how he exhibited himself here on earth as a man. Okay, had he not come, we could have lived by the law that was established, but the law was not going to ever save. That's why he had to come and replace the sacrificial stuff of the priest, because the priests themselves were human. You know, they went into the Holy of Holies to sacrifice, and when they did, if they weren't pure in some form or fashion, they died. And, that's why they put the little noose on their little feet and pulled them back out of there, because there were certain people that could only go into that Holy of Holies, and that was the tribe from Aaron. So the thing about it is, to be in total perfection was impossible. Jesus had to come and die on the cross. And Satan thought, I always believe that if he had to do it ever again, he'd never crucified him, because what happens is when Christ is on the cross, he doesn't really die from Satan because he had no sin. And only thing that brings death is sin. He had no sin. So it says, he said, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. So he gave up because of the flesh in the way that it was. He gave up so he could go down into hell, bring up, which we know when he rose, that there were people who were in Abraham's bosom, which where the people went prior to him being resurrected. And they came up out of the graves, and the Bible talks about that. So when the cross was up there and the two thieves on either side of Jesus, the one thief said, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus said, this day you will be with me in paradise, because at that point, the soul could, if you were a Christian and had been saved and believed, you could go immediately into heaven, where before the soul went in the bosom of Abraham. And if it was not a good soul, then of course we know it went into hell, because we have the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, and him saying, let him dip his finger in water and cool my tongue. And he's being told there's a great gulf between you two. So it was already established that the soul that chose not to be good was going to be in hellfire. And the persons that followed the law, Mosaic law or whatever, they went into the bosom of Abraham, but there was a gulf that separated them. But yet they could see one another and knew that. But then when Christ died on the cross, then he was able to go down. And the only reason is because he did not ever sin. And the only way you can die is that you sin. So we are born into a world that we are going to be sinners. Therefore, we have to die. But the thing about it is, Satan and his angels, Lucifer and his angels, they were created as, they never die. In other words, they are immortal. We were created with the body to die and then have that opportunity for a future and choices. Their choices led them to where they were, and they'll always be in hell.
So you're saying this life, you're saying that this life is a mission to attain good immortality.
You're in between. Yeah, you have a choice. In other words, you have a choice. If he had made us, if he had made Adam and Eve like he had made the angels, then we would have all gone to hell, period.
So let me ask you,
because that would have been the choices we would have made would have just been it. So because we have death, because we were not cursed in the garden like the serpent was, we have the chance in our lifetime, if we commit a sin, we can go and ask for forgiveness for it. You can be forgiven for something. And I'm not saying that you can go out and, let's say, just kill somebody, and just say, God, forgive me. I mean, God knows your heart. He knows every aspect about a person. Okay. So it's not like you could just do wrong and get forgiven. But what I'm saying is, when you do wrong and you truly ask for forgiveness, then you're forgiven of that sin.
I have to ask you
And then that's the opportunity for
for
paradise.
redemption, right? I
Yes.
have to ask you a technical question, Dr. Joy. Do you think it matters whether someone believes this in terms of their faith, or can someone just understand this? Like, is there a difference between those two things?
Well, I think that everybody is given an opportunity. I don't think that nobody that's on this earth is not given an opportunity to know between right and wrong.
Hmm.
Even if you were born on a desert island, you never heard the word of God, I think that you would have some understanding of what is right and what is wrong. I mean,
Hmm.
there's an accountability. That's why I truly believe that any child that dies before a certain age of not understanding
Hmm.
goes to heaven, that they're taken for those particular reasons. God is a just God. And I think that's why he holds certain people to higher standards. You know, if people who preach the gospel and tell the gospel and stand up for the gospel, he held his disciples in high esteem for this is what you're supposed to be doing. But at the same time, I think that proves the fact that God came as as Jesus and went to the cross and died, because every one of his disciples except John the Revelator, who he specifically said would live to be old, every one of those guys, they all went to a martyr death. Now, if you and I are good friends and you're just faking everybody out saying that you're a son of God, and you go to the cross and they crucify you and you don't raise from the dead, and they come to talk to me, am I going to say, oh, yeah, yeah, he rose from the dead? Well, if you keep saying that, we're going to turn you upside down and crucify you. Well, I'm going to tell you something. You might be my best friend and I might love you better than anything in the world, but I am not going to be crucified for you if
Hmm.
you didn't really die and raise again. I would never do that. So
It's
for
it's a
for
good
the for the
it's a good point. It's a good point.
for the disciples to all die as
Sure.
martyrs.
Horrible
And I'm going to
deaths
tell you,
too.
they were
Stoned.
terrible.
Yeah.
Stoned, boiled in oil, crucified upside down, heads
Sure.
cut off. If you didn't believe that, and seeing is believing, those guys, according to scripture, saw what happened, saw him alive again,
Hmm.
touched him, ate with him, and saw him go up into heaven saying, I'm coming back one day. This is what I want you to do. This is the Great Commission. This is what I want you to go. Go out and spread the word, whatever. They were willing to go to their deaths. And if you're willing to go to your death over something, you're not going on a whim. You're not going because you're my best
Islamic
friend.
terrorists are going to their death for something
And
they
they
believe
will.
in too.
They they will do that in certain ways, but there is no way that back in that day and in that
Hmm.
time, those guys would have put themselves, they didn't have to.
Hmm.
I mean, let's just say they were in an area that it didn't really, it wasn't like you had mass media. Like we're
Sure.
going to find this person, we're going to, we're going to get on the news and we're going to do whatever. They literally died standing up for something they truly believed in. Well, if you are not my friend, if I did not see you raised from the dead, I am not going to die for you.
Hmm.
I would not do that. And I don't think that we can look in history and see where that particular situation ever occurred. The other thing is the birth of him coming through Mary and the lineage that goes all the way back pure through the to Noah and then right into to Adam and Eve's son Seth, which was a pure lineage that I talk about in my books. The ability for something prophetically to be written in the Old Testament and every aspect of that Old Testament prophecy to be fulfilled in this particular individual is absolutely, if you are betting in Las Vegas, I mean, it's like 100%. And now that, like my stuff, where I try to look at what's happening in the world today and how is it lining up to the book of Revelation, what are the odds that we would have all these things that John the Revelator wrote 2,000 years ago on the Isle of Patmos, coming to pass in one generation.
What are those things?
What are the odds?
What are the things?
Well, for example, we're told that at the end of days that we're going to see a move away from compassion, that you're going to see the spirit of Cain, where selfishness becomes in control. So what are we seeing today? Selfie, 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 selfie. Everything is about self. Nothing is about anything but self. That was the first destruction, as you just said. Cain killed Abel. It's a selfish, I won't, doesn't matter. I mean, when we've got people on the internet that and Facebook who are willing to film somebody dying instead of helping them so they can get it up on Facebook, there's a real problem in love of your fellow man. And that was one thing, that love was the most important aspect, that you were to love, your fellow man as in such a way that he is a part. Once you understand that we're all the children of God made in his image, then every person out there, every person in the world is our brother or sister.
Mm-hmm.
It literally, we are a family of God. We are a family God, but yet we are killing each other and we're doing all these tragic things. And it says that there will be rumors and rumors of war, and that those things will get more engrossed and terrible and more violent. And it says in Scripture that it will be like the days of Noah, that the return of the Son of Man will be like the days of Noah. What was going on in Noah's day? You had the giants, they were destroying everything. There was blood, there was whatever. And the pure people of the lineage from Adam and Eve through Seth down to Noah's lineage were all of a pure lineage, where Cain's lineage was not pure. It was mixed with the fallen angels and whatever, the sons of God. So you had giants and you had beings walking the earth that were not supposed to be, because if you take a fallen angel and you mixed it with a human, then what it produced was a demon. And we know that from the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is a Sumerian cuneiform story, about that when a giant went to die, he was looking for able to keep his flesh alive, because inside of him was this spirit that can't die. It walks the earth. I can't go back to God, because when God gave a spirit and he breathed the breath of life into us, then that spirit went back to him. But those spirits that are created outside of the will of God don't have anywhere to go. And that's what Jesus encountered. And we know that. So when we look at the numbers of people, even the Catholic Church can't keep up with the exorcisms that they need to do today. There's so many people who are demonically possessed. And I will always believe in the research that I have done in regard to schizophrenia, which we now call bipolar and things of that nature, that we're not dealing with something medically wrong. We're dealing with some kind of demonic entity that is actually causing them to have split personalities. And when Jesus encountered that, that's what he drove out of them. It was not like, we need to give you a pill. He literally drove those things out.
So do you
Seven
think
demons.
Do you believe that there's mental illness, or do you think that mental illness?
Oh, yes. I believe that there can be sometimes that you have something that's chemical. There's no doubt in my mind that something can be chemical. But I do believe when you see the split personality into a entity, into a complete entity.
If someone hasn't actually experienced what it's like to be with somebody that has what is that, split personality? What was the one you said? I just lost. Not bipolar. Schizophrenia.
Schizophrenia.
Yeah,
Yes.
if you have never encountered or spent time with somebody who is, and I'm not a doctor, but I've known people that have had serious mental illnesses and experienced time with them. It does feel like they are possessed by a devil. It really does. Oops, sorry, this podcast has gone longer than normal. Holy mackerel. But yeah, I'm very interested. So, but it does feel like there's a possession going on. Actually, no, I'm not going to say that at all, that I know anything about it, because I'm not a priest and I'm not a doctor and I'm on either side. I'm just saying that when I've known people that have had severe mental illnesses, Dr. Joy, and to me, it did not feel like a sickness. It felt or that something was chemically wrong in their brain. It felt like when I was interacting. Yeah, like it felt like when it felt like a demon possession. Now, I don't know anything about that. I don't know whether it is or it isn't, but what I'm saying is that a lot of people say, "Oh, that Dr. Joy may be crazy." If you actually experience it, there's something that is eerily familiar to demonic possession about schizophrenia. Really, there is.
Yeah, yes, there is, and I studied a lot of that when I was in my undergraduate, and actually have dealt with schizophrenia, and I've dealt with people who hear the voices, and the voices are always
Mm-hmm.
not telling
Sure.
them good things. They're always
Yes.
bad things. They're always terrible things. Their whole demeanor changes, and I think one of the most interesting cases I had was a
And you
person
you
that was
can
known as
see a change
oh,
come over
complete
them.
change.
Yes.
It's a complete different
Yes.
voice, knowledge,
Yes.
information, everything. And the thing that was interesting to me that really solidified this for me was that I had a handicapped person who changed into another entity and they knew everything. Now, how do you do that if you are biologically not able to do it?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, they should have never been able to
Down
have
syndrome. Yeah.
been anything knowledge wise, talking wise, or information wise that would come out of them when they changed. Because we're saying that those people only have this capability and whatever, we can prove it, with
Sure.
psychological test, but yet there was a change. There was a complete change, a different entity that knew everything. And that was the waking up to me that I'm dealing with something that's not like science would want you or medical establishment would want you to believe it. And it does concern me because, we may be sending people off to mental institutions that we need to be really working with in a whole different limelight. And the more you feed that with medication and that kind of stuff, you're not really fixing the problem. The people who have been delivered and those things never return become their normal selves. They go on and they function fine. So I I guess because I have had the opportunity to see so much in my life, a lot of people will come to me because they know that I'm not going to say first of all that they're crazy. I want them to sit down and tell me the case, what's happened. I mean, I research stuff. I don't believe that I'm a prophet. I believe that God gave me what He gave me to research this and to try to bring it in a scientific way to prove everything that the Bible said is true. Um, and one of the things that I do a lot of research on is the pineal gland, and the pineal gland is considered the third eye on the forehead. A lot of Eastern religions have used this as the seat of the soul. Well, my interest came about because of the schizophrenia guy that I worked with that was handicapped. Um, And the fact that when I was studying in school, I had someone that was absolutely hypnotized. And what happened with them when they were hypnotized was that, I mean, they were sitting right next to me. And the professor, hypnotized this girl that was a friend of mine. He put a piece of paper in front of her and he gave her a pencil. And he told her, he said, "You're now in the first grade. When you're hypnotized, your eyes are closed. And if you've ever seen somebody dreaming, you could go into rapid eye movement and your eyelids will go like this, they'll quiver. But your eyes are closed, but they'll quiver." He puts a pencil down in front of her and he puts a sheet of paper in front of her. And he says, I'm going to take you back when you were in the first grade. And she started talking like she was in the first grade when she would answer him. And then he said, "I want you to write your name." She picked up the pencil, and I'm so old that a long time ago we had these huge pencils in the first grade. They're about this
Mm-hmm.
big around. And our lines on the paper would be like, instead of the little lines, it would be two lines together, which gave you a double line. Okay. She takes that paper and holds it down just like she did in the first grade. And she holds that little pencil like it's a big pencil. And she writes her name like she would up and down in that two line thing, like a first grader. Her eyes are not open.
Yeah. Hypnotism
She
is
hits the
creepy.
lines.
Yeah.
She
Hypnotism
hits
is
the
creepy to
lines,
me. Yeah.
okay? So then he says, "Tell me who's in the class with you." She turns around like she's looking Her eyes are doing this little rapid eye movement stuff. They're not open. The lids are just moving. She looks around and she says, "Oh, there's like Johnny," and she says, "What's he got on?" She looks down at his shoes. Look, yeah, I'm like, she's literally looking at somebody. Then he brings her to the 7th grade. Her voice changes. Okay. He puts the paper down in front of her again. He says, "I want you to write your name." She turns that paper sideways and she cursive writes her name in a line this big. Her eyes are closed. She is seeing in another way. Well, that just, oh my gosh. I'm like, this is like so interesting to me. So when I was a young child, my sister would sleepwalk. And my grandmother would always say, "Don't wake her up. Just tell her to go back and get in the bed." She would walk all down through the hall, all through this stuff, and never run into anything. She would get to the bed, you look up at her, and her eyes would be doing that same little rapid eye movement. And I'd say, "Go back and get in the bed." The old saying back in the day was, "Don't wake somebody up when they're sleepwalking. Don't
Sure.
ever do that." I don't know why, but that was like, don't do that. Okay. She'd go back and lay back down in the bed. She didn't even remember it the next day. Now we got people, that walk around swimming pools, walk out in the middle of nowhere, and they find out the next day somebody's turned on the lights in their house and whatever, and then they leave a camera going, and it's them, and they don't even know it. They don't run into anything. They don't fall over anything.
Have you ever been
They are
hypnotized,
seeing.
Dr. Joy?
No, I've never been hypnotized, and I have a real, I have a real thing about not wanting to be hypnotized because I think that you're affecting the pineal gland some way, and I think the pineal gland is a very important gland in us, and I think that's Satan's final frontier. A lot of my research is about that, about manipulating you, because the pineal gland is a workable eye, and it's an eye that's workable in a lizard. And it's right up under the skin, but he can see through it. We've got a workable one too, because that proves it. I mean, the numbers of people that I've researched about sleepwalking, that's been hypnotized, the whole 9 yards, I've seen it with my own eyes. I'm not making it up. They are using some other form to walk and look and see. And they're doing it with perfection, because if you can write your name that small, cursive, and you just get you a piece of paper and you try to close your eyes and you try to write it in that little bitty line, like, and hit it perfect, like you would if you were wanting to make an A on penmanship.
Yeah, I'm going on an angle here, Dr. Joy.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I'm saying. I've tried it myself. I've tried pretending I had a big pencil in my hand and try to use this and try to write my name like I did in the 1st grade. The girl was not playing. I knew her. She was a good friend of mine. The professor was very good at what he did. Dr. Brennan was an excellent professor. And he even showed us how you can make a Manchurian candidate back in the day before that was ever really known. We were always asking him, can you hypnotize me to make me do something I would not normally do? He says, usually if it's within your nature not to do something, you really can't totally be taught to do it, but you can do it in a way that you would do it. And we were like, well, what's that? So he took the girl that he had under and he told her, he said, when I bring you out of this, I want you to go over and open the door. And in college classes, your door is always closed, because if you didn't make it in when the bell rang, they locked you out. In other words, you weren't going to come in late. So anyway, when he walks her back up the steps, pops his hands, her eyes open up. She's looking around at everybody, like she hadn't even been asleep or out. She gets up, she walks over to the door, she opens the door and leaves it open, which we never did. Okay. She comes back and she sits back down at her desk. Dr. Brennan looks at her and he goes, "Why did you open the door?" And she looks around. She says, "I kind of felt hot in here." It's not hot. What she did is her mind filled in because she didn't know why she did it. So this was the thing. He said, you can be put under hypnosis. You can be told there's a squirt gun in the top of the cabinet in the bedroom. When your mother comes to the door, I want you to squirt her with a water gun. Your mother comes, fixing to come to the door. You walk up to the cabinet. You pull out a 44 Magnum. And when your mama comes to the door, you blow her brains out. Because you thought it was a squirt gun. So yes, the mind can be manipulated. And that's what we're seeing today with the pineal gland.
Is it
and the
mass
research that I'm doing.
manipulation? Is it mass manipulation? Are we suffering from a mass hypnosis?
You could possibly do that. And that's what concerns me about my research, is that when I did this Beguile series, Eden Armageddon, my last big series, that's what I was showing, that Satan's final frontier is going to be to use technology to brainwash you and you don't know it, so that biologically you have no control over your body. And it's already capable, the capability is already there, because the pineal gland is made out of a quartz, much like a transistor radio. It transmits and receives. They were using this technology back against the Russians when they were using stuff to try to get the Russians to go nuts. In other words, we want to be able to drive people crazy without firing a shot. Mm-hmm. So the intent is to manipulate you biologically so that you can't fight. So there's a capability using ways that we now know that MIT has already done, because they announced it in January, where they had the ability to make you hear voices in your head. Well, now, if you're sitting in a restaurant and all of a sudden you start hearing voices in your head, are you going to tell anybody?
No, probably not.
No, because
I might ask somebody, can you hear that voice? Can anyone else?
That's right. And when they go, no, can you hear a voice? Because then they're going to start calling a little paddy wagon and pick you up. And that's why most schizophrenics go nuts, because they hear the voices. They're actually connected to something. They're real voices, and they're connected to something. They're connected to something. And that pineal gland has got that kind of transistor. Well, I think
are they connected to something good or something bad?
Bad. Very bad.
What is evil like? What is evil like? What is evil? What is it like?
Well, we know.
Is it a spirit? Is it an embodiment? Is it a force? Is it like gravity? What is evil like?
We know that it's the same thing, but the opposite of good. So it is a
pure malevolence
force. It's a spiritual force.
Bad intent
that exists.
Bad intent
that has terrible intent. And I think that's why.
Do you think has that been let loose in America right now? This evil, malevolent force.
I think that it's always been here. You've always had the choice of good and evil. You've always heard the voices in your head as far as your conscience. In other words, if you went to do something wrong, you knew you shouldn't have done that, or you should, call somebody up and apologize to them. You've always had that little thing that lets you know, that little intuition, I guess it would be the easiest way to, that you shouldn't have done this or that. But I do believe, according to the end of days, that there is an unleashing of evil that's never been unleashed before. And I think it's because now that technology links us so easily with video games, video cameras, fiber optics, where television can be looking at you and you not know it, where we are able to manipulate sound and send it to your head and you receive it, like I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And that we can fire beams at you, radio waves, you can't feel them. So you don't know if somebody's attacking you with something.
Wait till you hear about Li-Fi. What do you think of that, Scott? You're really going to have your mind blown then.
Going to cook some geese.
Yeah. You ever heard of Li-Fi?
And those kinds of things have the ability to control you. Mm-hmm. They have the ability to manipulate you. And that's the thing, is that up until this point in our history of humanity, you have had the ability to make a decision about what you want to do. Mm-hmm. But if your body is being manipulated against you biologically, you can't stop it. In other words, if I use this
understand what you're saying.
to speed your heart up, If I use this to make you fearful,
Let me
if
give
I
you.
need to
Let me
make you
scare you a little bit.
paranoid, you can't stop it.
Let me scare you a little bit. Okay. So my main podcast is a lighting show. Okay. And one of the memes on my lighting show is the Matrix. Okay. And that's when I
Yes.
heard about Li-Fi. Okay. So
Yes.
Li-Fi is light fidelity internet. So that is not internet broadcast over radio signals, but internet broadcast over light waves.
Right. That's right. And see,
Okay.
that's what they're using for the ability to send the voice into your head.
Well, I went to a show. Hang on a second. I went to a show in Europe, and this is a technological show on Li-Fi, and they were showing us the receiver. So it's a receiver, right? Plugs into a computer, and they were showing us the receiver of how you receive the signal from the Li-Fi into your computer. And I asked maybe what was thought of as a dumb question, but I said, "Why do you need the receiver? Like, aren't these Li-Fi receptors right here? Right? Do not I receive signals, Li-Fi signals through my eyes all the time?" And now you're telling me about the pineal gland, which actually you're the fifth person on this podcast to talk about this from a completely different perspective, but that there's a set that we are seeing in multiple different and people are going to say Colligan's gone crazy. He's talking to Dr. Joye. He's talking to all these people about pineal glands and all. But you know what the fact is? That something else is going on in our world, and it has to do with our biological connection and these devices and the radio signals and the information we're receiving and the pornography and the video games. And it's almost like we're creating digital manifestations of the 7 deadly sins.
Oh, yes.
You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. Yes, because it is very real. And that's what's concerned me, is that we are to the point now that we can control you like a robot. And, when they came out with the George Clooney movie that had where they remotely controlled the donkey.
Yeah, I don't, but carry on.
That was a true story. You really can be remotely controlled. So if we want you to feel sad, if we want you to feel angry, if we want you to feel anxious, we can literally do that to you.
For sure. Facebook
by using
proved
the pineal
it.
gland.
But Facebook proved that they did an experiment. They can change people's moods.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's scary as hell.
It's like the Pokemon thing that came out and all the kids went into seizures that were watching that particular show in Japan. I mean, we can do all kinds of things with light. And the thing that people don't understand is that in seeing with our normal eye, we only see look, we have the light spectrum of light, but we only see like this much of the light.
Yeah, for sure.
All this other light around us, we can't see, but yet there's existence within that light.
Doesn't mean it's not there. It doesn't mean it's not there.
That's right. So the spiritual realm, when the Bible talked about when people saw into the spiritual realm, I think they were able to see past that spectrum, past that ability. I think it's all right here going on around us. And I think if we really could see it, it would be like it was described in the Bible. It's very awful and terrible, because the book of Daniel tells us these watchers are all watching us, and they're very cognizant of what we do, why we do, and how to make us fall. I mean, that's the intent. If we have a soul within us, we were created with a breath of life. It's after that. It wants to kill us. It wants to take that from us.
Yes. You know what's interesting?
Our soul and spirit looks like us. It's identical to us. It gets outside of the body. It looks like you.
You know what's so crazy, Dr. Joye? I've this has come up to me a bunch of times, and I'm going to say it to you as well. And you're talking about the soul, like that each human is a precious piece of God inside them, like light, right? And you're saying that the enemy is everywhere around you trying to get at that piece of light and destroy it, just like all of our great stories from history, whether they're Christian stories or whether they're other stories. It's about the preservation of that courage in a man and that nobility in a woman, and to go out into the world and be a good man and be a hero, and all that archetypal literature we have that throughout the ages. But it's interesting because everyone says the greatest trick the devil ever played was convincing the world he didn't exist. And I actually think that we need to change, but I actually think it's wrong. Here's what I'll tell you. I think that there's a new greatest trick he's played. And the greatest trick the devil's ever played is convincing you that you don't exist and that you don't matter. and that you don't have
That's
a
right. That when
soul.
you die, you don't have
Nothing
anything to worry about.
happens. Yeah. I think
That's
that
right. And
it's like the next level. Like in the past, our ancestors would never be able to have been convinced that they don't have a soul, that their life
that's
has
right.
no meaning, right? Like, can you
That's
imagine
right.
that? You never read that nihilism in anything prior in the old scriptures, that there's no God, I have no wonder, I'm just a product of accidental forces of the universe, and the fact that I'm conscious. Like even Voltaire would say, I think,
Yes.
therefore I am, right?
Yes.
But people have even thrown the cogito out. They won't even say that I'm conscious. I'm just a product of evolution, and all I do is destroy the world, right? And so I'm better
Mm-hmm.
off not existing or whatever. And I think that's what the new Satan or the new evil of our time is that it's it's tricking people into thinking they don't have a soul.
That's right. And that's the thing that they're after. That
And
is
that's what they're
that's the
after.
thing.
They've stolen
That's what
it
they're
from you
after.
now. Yes, that's the irony
That's
of the
right.
whole thing.
You know, your most precious possession is that lives within you. And I've been fortunate enough to understand near death experiences and have had some experiences in being like not there.
Mm-hmm.
Your your body looks just like you. So when you are outside of your body,
Mm-hmm.
and let's say you've been in a car accident, you will see your body laying down there. You'll know everything that's happening, but then you look at you and you're still you with your mind.
And people over and
So
over again
you are
report
alive
but
still.
they report experiencing this. Like we
Oh
humans
yes.
have always reported experiencing a sensation that there's something more to me than my flesh. Like for every
Yes.
culture, right? And I myself
Yes.
have had the experience of feeling. And look, I sell light bulbs every day. I don't know anything about this stuff, but I have in through prayer and meditation, I have experienced some minor sort of feelings of me, a sensation that there's more to me than my hands and my feet and my
Yes.
flesh.
Yes. And that's the thing, is that these beings are after that. They are
Yes,
after that.
I understand
It
what you're
it is
saying.
That's the whole thing that they're after. They could care less about your money, your food, your family. They're after your soul. That's all they're after. And that's why my research has gotten so engrossed on the pineal gland, is that it's Satan's final frontier, because he wants to mess up where you're going to end up in eternity by getting in your party line. I'll always believe that, because now we know that DNA sings. So everybody's DNA is singing. The moon sings. I mean, you can listen to the stars. Everything's singing. It said God spoke and everything was. So, in other words, it can come into existence. If we can break a glass singing at a certain note, imagine what the sound of God's voice could do if we can break a glass. Okay, so if we're all singing and we're all vibrating, we all are vibrating at a certain frequency.
And you
We
think
got
about how
Schumann
many people
resonance.
talk about vibrations. People talk
Okay,
about
we're
good
vibrating.
for sure. I agree with you
We're
on that too.
vibrating.
Yeah.
Okay, and when you're vibrating like that, you're producing your own sound. So if I'm a conductor and I've created an orchestra, and I've got somebody on drums, I got somebody on flute,
Sure, sure.
I got somebody on strings or whatever. If the fifth violin over there, if his string breaks, if I'm a good conductor, I know that string broke. I hear it. I'm a musician. If something's not a tune, I hear it. When you're out of tune, God knows it. But the
Mhm.
problem is, Satan knows it too.
Mhm.
And when he sees you're not really tuning in with
Mhm.
you're transmitting through this gland. You're transmitting and you are receiving.
Hmm.
Okay, you got your sound. If you start doing something, this is no lie. You start doing something bad, you bet your sound changes. Now, for example, I talk about this in my research. You can take two plants that are thriving, pretty plants. Take one and put it in classical music room. Take another one and put it in a rap with ugly music, ugly
Sure.
words. That plant in that rap music is going to die. You can take the one out of the classical music that's blossoming and is beautiful and put it in that room. That rap music is going to kill it. If you take water, you subject it to good sounds and bad sounds, it forms crystals that are perfect in good water, good sounds. It forms unequal crystals and terrible crystals in bad sounds. Your body is made up of 90% water.
Something like that.
You are vibrating, you are transmitting, and you are receiving. When you get off a kilter and off a sound, Satan knows it, God knows it. And he tells you in scripture to keep your mind on him. Keep your eye. He says eye in scripture, not eyes, eye on him. It says, don't you try to come up another way, like these people who try to illuminate themselves and bring the serpent up the spine. Most interesting thing is your pineal gland sits right here. Your brain is right over it. If you cross-section it, it looks like the Ark of the Covenant. Your brain it looks like the two angels on either side with the wings. And in the center is your Holy of Holies, Ark of the Covenant, mercy seat. The pineal gland sits just like, if you cross-section, that's what it looks like, the Ark of the Covenant. So if you were to bring the serpent up the spine, like Mideastern believe, to illuminate you, you are putting Satan in your Holy of Holies, because the Bible tells us we were created in the image of God, the temple of God. In the temple, this was where the Holy of Holies would be.
I have to ask you something, which I think is an interesting place to go now. Do you believe in predestination?
No.
So you believe each of us at any time is choosing good or evil, and that God has not pre-chosen it for us?
That's right. If he had wanted, I believe that God chooses people to do certain things. But
Sure.
If you are the person chosen and you don't step up to the plate, he'll pick somebody else. I believe it's like a big chess game. Satan's sitting down there, God's sitting down here.
God is
We're the player.
Time. God is subject to time as well as us.
God is the beginning and the end. So, like for example, if he created the computer program,
the Matrix,
and we're the people and we're playing in. That's right. We're the Matrix, and we're playing in there. Okay.
Yeah.
There's going to come a time in which way we're moving. Are we moving away from him, or are we moving to him? It's going to come a time. Checkmate.
Mm-hmm.
But it's your choice. He's the kind of God, and he could have created us as robots. He could have made Satan like a robot, but he didn't.
You know why
he made it out of love. And when you love someone, you don't control them. When you love someone, you allow them to be.
Exactly. Like let me give you a point. One of the and again, I just sell light bulbs every day, but I'm very interested in these topics, and it's been such a wonderful experience to speak to you, Dr. Joye. But whenever I hear people say we don't have free will and there's something else going on and we're optimistic and everything else, whenever I hear that, I always wonder, like, try treating another person as if they don't have free will and see what happens to the relationship.
Oh, yes.
Like, it's so obvious whether somebody philosophically talks themselves into thinking that technically we don't have free will because there's all these other forces in the world or not. If you tried to apply that to interacting with other human beings, everybody would hate you.
That's right. And that's the thing, that God is love. I mean, we're told scripture over and over and over again, God is love. And if you love someone, you love them unconditionally. Well, that means you have to let them do whatever you're trying to show them. You try to tell them. You warn them. You try to explain the story.
And
you give them a manual to follow, and they don't even read it.
And you try to be told, and you try to listen, and you try to hear for the good messages and distinguish between the good messages and the bad messages. You know what's interesting? C.S. Lewis, I remember reading his book. I can't remember what it was, whether it was Mere Christianity or what. If you're listening to this out there right now and you're an atheist or you think, C.S. Lewis is a great author regardless as to whether you're a Christian or not. And I'm a Christian. But he says the difference between good people and bad people is not that good people only do good and bad people only do bad. Sometimes bad people do good and sometimes good people do bad. The difference is that good people know the difference between good and evil. And evil people don't.
That's right.
They don't know when they're doing evil.
And the further you get away from God, the further you get away, the less you will hear that little conscious voice that tells you shouldn't
Interesting.
do that, or you need to apologize, or you need to get it right with God. The closer you are to God, the moment you do something wrong, you hear it. Oh, I
Mm.
shouldn't have done that. You feel it. Oh my gosh, I made the wrong decision. The further you get away from God and you justify, well, everybody else is doing it. Nobody saw me. I did it in the closet. Nobody knows about it. You know, the more you do it, the
Mm.
further you get away and the less that little voice comes into your mind that says, you need to get right about this.
Well,
So
basically, what you're
it's a
saying is
game
that Satan
as
is
to
stealing your soul from you,
exactly. I mean, that's the thing that's eternal.
right?
I mean, we know that our flesh, it dies. It goes back to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so he's not after that. He's after the thing that's eternal, the thing that will be with him forever in a burning fire. And some people say, well, Joy, I mean, if it's lights out, and I'm like, first of all, it's not lights out because the law of thermodynamics, science has proved that. Once energy is made, it's always here. It can be a different form, fashion, whatever, but it never is destroyed. Okay, if that's the case, every cell in our skin, we can take any cell, plop it off, and like I said, haul out a woman's egg, put that in there and electrify it and put it inside a woman, 9 months, she's going to deliver joy again. Okay? Every cell in your body is a holographic you. Every cell. Think of all the cells that are laying all over the world of everybody that's ever been here. Okay? You think about the burning bush that was not consumed. Don't tell me that when you get to hell that you can't be burned and burned and burned over. In other words, bring you back, bring you back, burn you. You could keep doing it forever and never be
I
consumed,
actually have
and
a
yet you would feel that torment.
okay. So let me ask you another theory that I have because I'm interested in your opinion on this. I have this idea that instead of going to heaven or going to hell, that we're already in one or the other right now. Like you don't have to go very far in Toronto where I am to see people that are in hell right now. You know what I mean? People on that are using drugs and alcohol and are living on the streets. And if
Mhm.
you and one of the things that's interesting, it's like there's something about the way people ignore that is very unhuman or soul stealing. So for example, if you go downtown into Toronto and you walk down one of the major streets, so Toronto's a massive city. It's smaller than
Yes.
New York and LA, but not much smaller than Chicago, probably the same size. You'll see people lying on the streets in the freezing cold winter,
Mhm.
clearly addicted to drugs or alcohol or multiple problems, right? And we
Mhm.
ignore them. And
That's right.
there's something dehumanizing about their expression. It's like you don't even want to look at them because you're looking at what hell is in a way. Like that's
Mhm.
hell. I mean, I don't know how hell is in terms of the eternal fire and all that sort of stuff, but those people, when you see them and they're addicted to methamphetamines or one of these crazy drugs and they're lying on the streets in the cold, and Toronto's cold, man, and
Mhm.
and they're there and they're just so desperate that like they're and we just walk by them.
Mhm. I mean,
And
it's no different than back in the day when there was leprosy. I mean, the skin was literally falling off of people's bones.
but what I'm
And we know
saying
that
is
the
that isn't that person already in hell?
well, it's the consequences of sin upon this earth. And you kind of, if you choose to do drugs, those things can happen. If you choose to, use alcohol, those things are going to happen. If you
But
if you
is it a
choose to,
sign of the end times that we have drugs and we have access to sin so powerful that it's coming to the point where maybe it's beyond human capability to resist it?
I think it's coming to the point that we saw in Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, we're to the point where I've always said if God doesn't come back, he'd have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah, and he completely destroyed it off the face of the earth. Sin can get so bad that we are seeing that kind of thing happening. I mean, it's not only in the big towns like where you are, it's also in the little towns where I live that you never saw these kinds of things before. You never saw the drugs, you never saw the types of mistreating of children and pedophilia and just everything. Everything is rampant. It doesn't matter whether you're in a big city or a small town. It's here. There's drugs, there's crime, there's killings, there's terrible torment. And the thing about it is, again, we forget that we live in a fallen world, and that we have a manual that most people never read, and that's the Bible. And it's telling us you're going to suffer. There's going to be bad days. You're going to go through these kinds of things, but you have a choice that these 70, 80 years on this earth are one way. Do you want it to be different than here? And if you're living in those hell-like situations, you don't want to continue in something that's going to be even worse than that. You've got to think, do you really want to live? Where do you want your soul to go? It's going to go somewhere. I mean, I've just already said it exists. It's real. And it's got
it's
a
an
choice.
eternal soul.
And it's eternal. It cannot be, it will never die.
Will it have
never, ever die.
Will it have knowledge of this life?
Yes.
Will it remember Michael Colligan?
You will be known. You will be known. You'll be known. Totally known. It says you will know the others. You'll be known. The thing, it's like I was telling you a while ago, when I saw that schizophrenic person that was handicapped, not be able to say certain words and have even context of things, turn into another individual and have context of everything, it tells me that our mind is very capable of doing things that we never imagined. There are people who live on this planet that literally you can say, what were you doing 15 years ago today, on this day at 1 o'clock in the afternoon?
Sure.
They have the ability to remember it. In hypnosis, you can be brought back to remember those kinds of things. I mean, I saw that happen. So when you die, your mind is it's not limited. You're not seeing through rose-colored glasses. You're not seeing through a glass darkly. The Bible tells us about these kinds of things, that your ability to understand will be broadened. And some people say, well, I won't be happy in heaven if, Uncle so-and-so is burning in hell. You will, because you'll have the mind that it gets that. Everybody has a chance to make it. God, while he is a loving God, we are his children. He's got to be saddened over the choices that we make every day, whether it's good or bad. But how could you live in eternity if you were totally unhappy? It's because you're going to have the mind that they had every opportunity given to them. They chose it. It's like your best friend. If they choose to walk away and you have done everything in your power to love them, to show them, to care for them, when they walk away, you can sit there and cry forever. They're never coming back. That's their choice. Your mindset, when you get to heaven, will be that was their choice. They had every chance.
Why is it that you believe we live in the end times now?
Because of what we're seeing. The Bible tells us that at the end of days, you're going to see it happen like a woman in travail. And anybody that knows anything about a woman giving birth, when she first finds out she's pregnant, she might have a little morning sickness or whatever. But then as time goes on and she gets closer to the time to deliver, she starts getting pain. And that pain will start out, and it might be once every, 10 days. Then as she gets closer to birthing the child, that pain will get once every 5 days, and once every 3 days, and then once every 2 days, and then once a day, and then 10 times in a day. And then as those contractions really start, they come so fast that the baby's born. So the timing gets closer together, the intensity gets worse, and then it happens. Okay, we look at the earthquakes. We can look at Google Map. I watch that every day, and on the number of earthquakes worldwide. In my book, I went back years and showed where these were the number of earthquakes we had, and these were the level of intensity, how many people were killed over time. Well, we might have a big one like 25 years ago, a big one 50 years ago, whatever. But then the smaller ones and the bigger ones get closer, and the smaller ones and the bigger ones are getting closer. And then you're starting to see, like if just in the United States, how many, if you go on Google Map, you can see how many are happening and how many happened within the last 24 hours. So technology is allowing us to see that. But we're seeing the intensity and the numbers getting close together. The same thing with hurricanes. We had really bad hurricanes when I was a little girl. Camille was one of the worst ones. But yet we've had hurricanes closer, numbers together, destroying more property, destroying more things. And then we've got tornadoes. For example, when I was a little girl living in this area, we might have seen one tornado. Now we have them almost every time a cloud comes up, we're having tornadoes. Well, I worked out in tobacco fields all my life. We could not have worked in 100-degree temperature with the humidity as high as it is in South Georgia, like I used to work. I'm talking about with no cab on a truck. No cab on a tractor, sitting in the hot sun. I drove a tractor, a Massey Ferguson, sitting in the hot sun up and down roads. I physically could not do that today with the heat that we have. You would have a heat stroke. People down here have heat strokes or having heat problems all the time trying to work outside. And they have even gone to trying to work at night so that they don't have to work during the daytime. So they're like paving roads at night because they can't stand the asphalt during the day. It's too hot. Their body physically can't deal with it. So what we're seeing is the increase in all of that. And then now, we always went swimming in our ponds. Our ponds are starting to get filled with this algae. And now we know, like Mississippi just closed, I think, 21 of their beaches in Mississippi. You can't go because of the algae and the toxic stuff that comes off that algae. I started writing about that actually in my first book, Antichrist, back in 1999. You get toxic blooms. They kill off the sea. They kill off the mammals that are out in the sea. They don't want you eating the fish from there. If you get in the water, it can kill you. If you breathe it, it's a neurotoxin. Okay. So now beaches have got like levels. If you go to the beach, it'll say level of, should you be in the water today? It's been tested. Well, now, if you really look at it, none of the water is really good down all through the areas of the Gulf and up the eastern, coast. They're all having problems where they're even closing beaches, not even to be on the sand. Don't even be near the sand. We never had that when I was growing up. Flesh-eating bacteria that literally, my husband, when he was so sick, I saw a man come in where he had eaten his whole arm off. And they were trying to do stuff to save him. They didn't. You can't, it is like, it's unreal to see something that eats your flesh. Oh my gosh. It's like, that is like that. Oh my gosh. It's like worse. So, for example, swimming pools. Like I have a pool. And, once in a while I might get like an algae problem. Now, like within months after, I guess, March or April, I already had problems with algae. And algae like the yellow mustard algae. It happens just within days, and you're chlorinating and you're doing all kinds of stuff. But the pool water, and I swim a lot. This time of year, you might have the surface of the water would be hot. But if you swim down, like say 8 foot or 9 foot in the deep end, you have cold water in your pool. Oh no, it's as hot at 8 or 9 feet down as it is on the surface. And then you're seeing the numbers of mammals and fish, birds. We used to have certain birds that would migrate through our area that don't even come through here anymore. We have migratory paths that's strange that they're saying, these birds are in places they shouldn't be. They're not going back to where they once were.
And do you think this is a result of climate
everywhere.
change, or you think this is a result of the manifestation of evil in the world, or those things are the same thing?
I think the powers that be know that the Bible tells us what's happening. But it's easier to tell people it's climate change than to say, look, this is fixing to get worse. Our sun is going to scorch us to the point that we're going to lose the ability to have food. We've already got institutions who are looking at building big balloons and putting up in the atmosphere to block out sun. They know it's coming. We've got all kinds of, NASA has got all kinds of satellites, I mean, not telescopes lined up, watching the skies. Where they used to give us information about, meteorites and whatever. They're getting bigger. They're getting larger. They're hitting things. When I was a little girl, I used to watch, always go out and watch meteorite shows and whatever when they were going to be around. And it was time for them. You might see like little flashes, whatever. Now you see big ones, and they'll like go a long way with long tails. They're bigger. They're exploding. And NASA knows this, and they're not willing to give off information like they once were. So then they've got a telescope out there in Arizona that they're watching the sun. The Bible says we're going to get hit by something called wormwood. It's coming. We're going to get hit, and they're looking for it. They're waiting for it. They're watching for it.
What
Even
is
the
wormwood?
Vatican.
What is wormwood?
Wormwood is a star. It'll be a type of planet or star that's coming at us, and it's going to hit us. And the Bible says when it hits Earth, it's going to destroy a third of everything. It is coming. It is going to hit us. Now, I've heard people say, oh, that's like Nibiru. There's all kinds of terms that they use about it, but it's coming. The Bible says it's coming. It's coming, and they're watching for it. Your UFO stuff that everybody used to laugh about, that's conspiracy. I've seen enough UFOs. It's real. There's something out there. It's something that's doing stuff that does not make sense. I've looked at it from a scientific standpoint. Our bodies cannot be in that kind of craft in the air doing what I've seen them do with my own eyes. I see 20/20, and I don't take drugs, never have, and I'm a Christian. I have no reason to lie about it. Something's going on, and now that the Navy and the Air Force guys, there's gotten to be too many. They're seeing them daily. That's why it's getting to the point they can't keep it under wraps. They're coming out on CNN and Fox and everything else saying, look, we don't know what it is. It's not the Russians. It's not the Chinese. We have the best military equipment possible, and I can't keep up with it. I don't know what it is. I cannot identify it. It's doing strange things. It is doing strange things.
Are they UFOs or are they just evil spirits?
I think that it's powered by evil. I will always believe that when the Bible tells us that at the end of days, the abyss is going to be open, we've been doing crazy things like trying to drill down into the mantle, to the earth, and doing all kinds of stuff. Hell is below us. The Bible says it's below us. There's no doubt in my mind, hell is down there. I even said one time years ago that if somebody was a billionaire and had plenty of money that would be willing to just try to drill down there, I think it's down there. And I'm going to tell you something.
You think it's like a geological place?
Oh, I think it's a geological place. I think it's really there. And a long time
there's
ago,
a bunch of undying spirits down there that are being eternally tortured.
That's
They're being
right.
eternally
tortured. And having
That's
known
scary
about
as hell.
near-death experiences, and know that when you're outside of your body, that you are still able to talk like Jesus. When he came back, he was in a resurrected body, but before he resurrected, they were talking to him. He looked just like himself. When he came back in the resurrected body, then there he was eating with them. So again, I think that's where the thing is, that people don't understand that your soul is really real, that it's inside of you. It looks like you. It is you. It's like now, I love athletics, and I overdid swimming the other day and have really had a problem with an upper back muscle. I still feel like I'm 12 years old when I get in that pool. My mind says I can still do what I could do back then, but my body won't let me. When you're outside of your body, you don't have the restrictions of what is a shell. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
You don't have that restriction, but your mind is still capable of all this stuff. You are still you in every sense. You're only limited by your body's capability. And I used to not understand that. When my grandmother, when she was 90 years old, she'd be out chopping and doing things in the wood and stuff, chopping up wood. And she'd come in, and my mother would get so mad at her. And she'd say, well, Stella, she said, I thought I could still do it because my mind said I could do it. She said, one day you'll understand that. And yes, I understand that now. I don't feel any different than I used to be when I was that age. It's just that I can't do it because my body can't keep it. It's not because I haven't stayed in shape, because I have.
Sure.
It's just the aging process. But that body, when you come out of it, you're still you. You still look like you. You still think like you. And you're going to know your mama and your daddy. You're going to know. You are going to know you have that capability. You have that capability. And that thing that's so perfect that's you is what evil is after. And I fully believe hell is down there below us. And even in the northern sky, there's an area in the north that there's no stars. That there's been books written that that's where God's throne is. Well, there's no stars up there. There's nothing in that area. But yet everywhere else there is. You can get into the flat earth theories and all this kind of stuff, whatever. But I will always believe that hell's below us. A long time ago, I think it was Art Bell.
But yeah,
had someone that gave them a microphone. They drilled down and they heard what they thought it was the voices of hell. They put a microphone way down in the earth, and it literally did sound like people screaming at the top of their lungs. I think I've got that still saved on a thing upstairs in my.
But what does it matter?
Folders.
Where it does? I don't know if it matters where it is, Dr. Joy.
It doesn't really matter what it is, but can you imagine? Can you imagine if we could drill down and we could hear that? How you'd be running to a church and going, "Oh my gosh, forgive me for every little thing I've ever done."
I think
that the rich man in hell. That's why he was saying, let so and so come see me. Let me tell them. And he was like, no, because I've sent the Son of God, and they haven't understood that yet.
See,
but I'm telling you, if you could literally hear hell, you would be like changed forever.
Sure,
you would never want to go there.
I think that simple is it's like let's say you have a teenager kid, and the teenage kid is playing around with drugs or alcohol or sex or one of the great 7 deadly sins. And they think they have control over all this stuff, right? They're young, they're cocky, and that's what happens. I think if you were, never mind the hell and the earth, you don't have to go that far down to see the results of evil, actually. You can see people being tormented very quickly.
On earth, yes.
Yes. I mean, so, I mean, it's like if people could see the future hell to which their actions were going to place them, yes, they would change their actions. The problem is that the road to hell is wide and difficult to see.
Oh, yes.
It's hard to see what's actually happening. And half the time it's a party.
And the thing about it, Satan wants you to be totally entertained. And the perfect example of that is you can take a frog and put him in water on a stove.
That's right.
And you can gradually turn the heat up till you can actually boil him before he knows to get out.
Mm-hmm.
He'll die boiling because you did it so subtly that he didn't realize what was happening to him. And that's one of the reasons I named this last series that I did Beguiled.
Beguiled is a perfect word.
That's it's doing it in such a nice little way with a little evil hidden under it that you're going right along with it because, hey, everybody's doing it. It's not bad. It'll make you feel good. Everybody's doing it. And everybody just goes, right? God's love. God loves you. He's not going to be a bad guy. And we worship the same God by different names. We're all doing the same little thing. It's playing words on your mind to let you feel comfortable enough to do wrong. But there's only one person going to stand in judgment, and that's you. You can't go, well, so-and-so was doing it, or so-and-so told me to do it, or I didn't think it was bad.
So you believe, let me just clear this up.
Before him.
I want to ask you this. So you believe that at the end of days, the dead shall be risen from their spirits. We will all gather together, and we will be judged.
But your body will come back to you. Your body will be changed just like Jesus was when he was resurrected.
So we'll all be there, and all of our deeds will be open for all of the humans to see.
That's right. And those people that are Christians who have probably will be caught up when the rapture, word rapture is not in scripture, but the catching away is. And you're caught away to enter into the bride. You become the bride of Christ, and there's a marriage supper of the Lamb. And that really happens during the time that the great wrath is happening here on the earth with the battle of
So you
Armageddon.
believe in the
So the
physical
first one,
rapture. You believe that your body and soul will be raptured and you will disappear, but your car will still be there driving down the road or whatever.
that's right. I fully
Mm.
believe that according to the catching away. Now, the word rapture is not in the Bible, but catching away is. And I believe that there's a silence in heaven. I believe that it happens like that. I think you're sealed. That's when the 144,000 are sealed in their forehead
Yeah.
to be able to be like Noah that was sealed inside the ark for those numbers of a year, a little over a year. I believe the great wrath will be that part that will lead to the battle of Armageddon. But I do believe the bride of Christ will actually be taken out to go to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And it's done according to the Jewish feast as the thief in the night. And as you're told that there are 10 virgins, 5 have their lamps lit, 5
Sure.
don't. You know, they don't have
Yeah.
the oil.
That's a
And
scary parable. That's a scary
5 get
parable.
left.
Yeah.
5 get left. And so when the door is closed, it's closed. You can't get in. So in my Beguile series, I talk about the thief in the night because that's a whole different thing from the second coming of Christ. It is done in a secret manner in which only those people go. And the people that are left, there are 12 tribes still left on the earth, 12,000 of them for a total of 144,000. They're going to be sealed in the forehead. Well, guess why they're sealed in the forehead? Remember what we said was right here?
The pineal gland. Yes.
That's right. That's why they're sealed in the forehead, because they will not be able to be manipulated by the Antichrist and the technology that he will be able to ensue against you. So they are sealed in the forehead. And they have to go through the end of days. And then the Bible tells us the first will be last and last will be first. It's because God came to the chosen people, the Israelites, Hebrews, and they rejected him. And then the Gentiles were brought in. We became the bride of Christ. We are taken out first, so we're not going to suffer. We will go through a tribulational period, but we will not suffer the great wrath, according
What
to
is
the book of Revelation.
what is the mark of
There's
the
the
what is the mark of the beast?
Well, it says it's in your forehead and in your right hand. And we know that the little chips that they put into people that you can scan your hand if you go into a store or whatever, they can find you by satellite. And it also was something that Obama wanted as a part of our healthcare plan, that you would just scan and everything medically would be known about you and billing and whole 9 yards. So I feel certain that something of that magnitude, that you will have to take it. In other words, you will choose to take it. I used to think that would never be possible because people wouldn't doctor up their bodies. But now that everybody's got tattoos and piercings, nobody thinks twice about getting a mark or doing something. So it's kind of been established to have you feel like there's nothing to it. Oh, it'll be a good thing or whatever. But I think it will come down to something where you will not be able to buy, sell, or trade unless you have it, and you'll know that it's not that you're going to be doing evil when you do it. There's no doubt in my mind you have the choice, and you'll know it's evil, and you're going to say, "Oh, I'm willing to take it because I want to live, or I want to buy, sell, or trade, or whatever." You're going to have it. In other words, it will be yes or no, and it's either your death or you're going to live by having it, or think you're going to live, but actually you're sending your soul straight to hell. So it's some type of technology, I'm sure. It's something that is there, and I think that's one reason the 144,000 are sealed in the forehead, to go through that time period, that they don't choose it. And of course, we know according to Scripture they're going to be martyred, very seriously
Do
martyred.
people already have the mark of the beast yet? Has it happened?
I don't think the mark of the beast is here yet. I think that the preemptive things that are leading to it are here, and I think that's the RFID chip that they put under the skin that I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that our money is going to things like Bitcoin, where you can't tangibly get a hold of money, internet wise. You're not really. We're going to debit cards, so we don't use. We don't have cash on us. We don't have coins. The gold has been taken out. Gold's not like it used to be. So, I mean, we're setting ourselves up, excuse me, right now, that um, if we were to have some kind of power outage in the United States, we'd all be killing each other within days.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
And martial law has already been put in place according to, the executive orders of the government by our presidents. And I write about that in some of my books too, especially Eden, the knowledge of good and evil. That you will be told to, we'll go under martial law. You'll be told to go to the post office or whatever and be set up. And I figure like probably at that period of time would probably be sometime the mark of the beast would be initiated.
What is the number 666? What is all that about?
I think it's the number of a man's name, and until he takes the reins as to what he's going to be, you won't know who it is as far as the name to be able to make it figure into the gematria, which we know that they did back in the Greek days. They everybody had a number to their name, but until a person gets their name as the ruler, for example, just like the Pope Francis, his real name is one thing, but he took the name as Pope and he chose Pope Francis. So until that person gets on the world stage and chooses their name, whether it be king, counselor, whatever, you won't be able to figure that gematria. And there's a reason behind that. I mean, Satan's not stupid. There are people like I've been doing that for, I guess, probably 30 years, taking names and doing. And I even take a name in one of my books and bring it down to the possibility of using like how would a person's title play into that. We've had people's names who have ended up being 666, but it's just that at that point in time, when it's time for him to revealing, the people that probably will know it will be Christians if we're not already taken out in the catch and wait. I fully believe we'll be here before. I mean, that we'll know it's him before we're taken out. Some people don't want to believe that. They want to say like, I just want to go and I don't want to have to be any part of it. But I already see the writing on the wall because Saint Malachi's prophecy of the popes. Francis is the last pope. We've got people in place that are, able to rule the world. The British Empire was the empire that was
when
once
you
the
say
Roman
that
Empire.
when you say that Francis is the last pope, do you mean that he's the last pope or he's the last true pope?
I believe that he's the last pope according to the Saint Malachi prophecies. He's fulfilled that prophecy of the pope, and I mentioned that in my book Eden. He's fulfilled the requirements of Saint Malachi's prophecies. Every one of them has. The one before Benedict.
Oh, Benedict, yeah.
Benedict, John Paul, all the ones, that he told about have actually become prophetically what he wrote. It's some very amazing prophecy, very amazing. So you look at like we were talking about, the signs, the pestilences,
Sure.
it being like
What's
a
the
woman
whore
in
of
travail.
Babylon? What's the whore of Babylon? What's all that about?
I fully believe that is Jerusalem, because it says it's where the prophets were killed and slaughtered, the Great Babylon. And I believe that is where the Great Babylon is. And then the whore itself is the Roman Catholic Church, because of the Pope's connection to what I believe will be the false prophet, because he is going to be able to stand and he's going to be able to point his hand and say, this is the vicar of Christ that I've got to give the keys back to. According to Malachi's prophecy, the Pope will have to return the keys. The Catholics believe that Peter was their rock. We know that as Christians that Peter was the rock because was understanding that Jesus was the Son of God. And on that foundation was things made. Catholics believe that Peter was the rock. It was not, it was the foundation of knowing that God was who he was. But they believe that. So he's the vicar of Christ. And it's him being the vicar of Christ, they believe he's in the place of Christ here on earth. Okay. When St. Malachi's prophecy ends, that guy has got to turn the keys back over to the rightful owner. Well, if he's in the place of Jesus or in place of Christ, when Christ shows back up, he's going to have to turn the keys back. The problem is he's turning it back to the Antichrist.
You think the Pope is going to somehow anoint the Antichrist?
Oh yes, he will. He have to, because if the Antichrist is going to say he's Messiah and he's the returned Messiah, then the Pope has to return the keys back to the rightful owner. He's no longer the vicar. He's got to turn them back, and that's what Malachi's prophecy says he's going to do. He's going to be slaughtered.
The Pope's going to be slaughtered.
Slaughtered.
And he believes
he's no longer in the place of Christ. He cannot fulfill he can't, in other words, they've always believed he's in place of Jesus. So he can't stand there equal to Jesus or be in place of him if you've got the Messiah, who is the Antichrist, saying he is God in the flesh.
So
the Bible says, he says, I am God in the flesh.
The world's going to bring forth a man who is going to be claiming to be the Messiah, who will actually be the embodiment of Satan or evil or the
exactly.
Right? And he is going to approach the Catholic Church and say, give me back what is mine.
I don't think he will not approach them. They're going to say it's him. The false prophet will adore him and say it's him and be able to prove it. They're going to try to prove it's Jesus. And they're going to try to prove it using the Shroud of Turin. Yeah. They've got it all set up to put it in place so there's no questions asked that that's the return Messiah. And it's so confusing that those 144,000 who have been practicing Mosaic law, that they've got two witnesses that's going to come to try to tell them that's not the guy. But we were told in Thessalonians to be careful. It says there's going to be a Jesus here, there, and everywhere. And he's going to walk into the temple proclaiming himself that he is God. And the temple, Jesus said, I'm going to raise it up in 3 days. He's talking about his body. They've got the cloth. They've got the blood, which Ron Wyatt proved was still alive when it was reconstituted. And I've got that at my website. They've got the cells of Jesus. Don't tell me they haven't cloned him. A clone is the only thing that you can bring to this earth that can walk in human flesh. Wait, let me tell you, human flesh and not have a soul. If you clone me 100 times, I can only die once because I have a soul that's in me. But I can bring me back 100 times.
So hang on. You're saying this is actually, it's actually interesting because if I had have met you 10 years ago, I would have said you're a quack. But I think
a lot of people were going to question it, but
I just think there's so many things happening now, like technologies that were unimaginable. Never mind 50 years ago, 15 years ago. Like the fact that we are having a real-time conversation over the internet is crazy, and that we can see each other. Like this is out of Star Trek from the 70s.
That's right.
You watching Star Trek, you'd be like, oh yeah, and that'll happen one day. Now we're doing it right now. The idea that the Messiah or a fake Messiah would be cloned from the cells of Christ, and that somehow, like if you were to go back in time 100 years ago and say, yeah, it's not that big a deal. It's actually, we're just cloning the human from his cells. It's not really that big a deal. That's crazy technology. Like you read National Geographic and you hear about them. Oh, we're going to recreate the saber-toothed tiger. We're going to, or a woolly mammoth by placing the cells, and after 6 or 7 generations, it's going to be 98% mammoth and only 2% elephant or whatever. And what you're saying is this idea of it's almost like Frankensteinian in a way. You ever read the book Frankenstein?
Oh yeah. Well, Frankenstein was actually from the Jewish golem. That's what they believed, that there were golem that walked the earth, that were the first male and females that didn't have souls, which were created in first part of Genesis. Only in the garden did man and Adam receive the soul.
But
the
it's
breath of
almost
life.
like it's what we have now is like this collision in our times of the ability for the science to complete the mythological.
That's
Does that
right.
make
It actually is
sense?
proven the Bible. I've always said that science is now proving what the Bible told us all along that we thought was impossible.
When you bring these worlds together, it's like people say, "Oh, Colligan's gone crazy. He's talking about this or whatever." But it's like science has the ability to deliver the mythological.
It does.
Like whatever myth that
It
you
all and
want to
it.
believe in, we can do it in a sense, in a
Mhm.
Frankensteinian weird
Way.
scientific way. Yes, like we can't create
And that's
beauty, but we can imitate or and makes like I find this all this technology. What's that stuff called where they change the cells? It's called uh,
Are we talking stem cells or CRISPR?
CRISPR-Cas9, this
Yeah.
CRISPR-Cas9
yes.
technology, where they can
Hmm.
reach in and they're doing it in China, and it's like a debate of whether they should do it or not. There's
Well, you can
something,
take certain proteins that you feed a cell would change it. You can make it like a reproductive cell or seminate cell. You can do different stuff with it, depending on the
but there's
type of
something
protein.
there's from if you're a human being in this world and you're imbued with a soul and you feel like a unique person in the light of Christ or in the light of God or whatever your belief system is, Dr. Joy, and you hear
Uh huh.
about that, you hear about people doing that, you can't think that there's anything but an evil outcome to that.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
there's what like to me when you hear about someone being able to manipulate human genes, designer babies, people
That's
where
right.
they're playing with their intelligence, they're going to be smarter
I mean,
humans that
that's what Hitler was attempting to do. I mean, that's what he was after
in
was
a
the pure
crude
Aryan
way,
race.
in a crude way, but now
It was beginning. It was beginning of the technology that we have now, because we were cloning, are able to clone a frog back in the 1800s. When I started researching cloning and began to realize that the capability of keeping flesh alive is no problem. In fact, the first tumor they took out of a woman that had cancer, still pieces of it alive in petri dishes, because you can keep feeding flesh proteins and it'll stay alive. It's just that your soul, you can't keep it. You die, it's out of your body. And anybody that's had a near death experience, it's immediate. Anybody that's come back into their body, they'll roll over, and most of them will go back in this area, back in.
hmm, hmm. You know,
So it's
there's
flesh,
something
keeping
but
flesh alive is no problem.
there's the collision of the scientific and the mythological. So when I was a child, I'll give you a little bit of my story just to compare with yours. So um, my parents were Catholics, are Catholics. I'm a Catholic, but my parents left the Catholic Church for a large part of my childhood, the formative
Mhm.
years, from the age of 4 to the age of, say, 18. And then they came back to the Catholic Church. Okay. But during that period, my parents went on a pretty wild exploratory experience from tent healers to
Yeah,
rapture believers,
yeah,
predestination people. And I went on this like tour as a child of all these different highly emotional religious experiences and preachers and
yeah.
ideas. And it was interesting to me because I always thought like, well, that's pretty crazy that this guy believes that everyone's going to disappear one day, or that's crazy
Mhm.
that this person over here. And we had movies, we had everything, and we would go through these different churches, these different Protestant sects, and I'd be like, oh, that guy's a cult leader right there. I saw it when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I'd be
Yeah,
like, that guy's a cult leader. Like that's a cult leader right
yeah.
there. And my parents, everyone be speaking in tongues and waving their hands in the air and this kind of stuff. But
Oh, yeah,
I used to be at
yeah,
the back
yeah.
and I'd be like, guy's a cult leader. And but anyway, I met and you'd hear all these ideas, and then I went back to the Catholic Church when I became older, but and now I go to mass every Sunday and with my kids and all that. But I have a very unique religious upbringing that you
Mhm.
know I know the type this ideas, and there's something about the ideas, and I'm not trying to be prophetic. I'm just saying that it seems to me that we are actually on I don't know what the right word is. We're on the cusp of having the ability to create, all the necessary things required in order to fulfill these crazy prophecies that seem so impossible to people 1,000 years ago or whatever.
That's right. And it's amazing to me that somebody
Like the
on the
ability
island
to
of Patmos came up with
consume
all
the
this.
earth in fire. The ability to
Yes.
consume the entire earth in fire. We have that ability.
That's right.
We could do
The
that.
atomic bomb, the ability
Sure.
to make the bones, disintegrate, the ability to cross the Euphrates, to dry it up. And the Battle of Armageddon, where the Metaghetto is a natural battlefield that, people like Patton and MacArthur
Even
were
the way
that's the perfect
Israel,
place to
even the way
have a
Israel is
battle.
under threat, even the way Israel
That's
is under
right.
threat right now
Constantly.
is, it's like, I look at it and I'm just like, man, what is it about this? There's something else going
Promised
on
land.
here. Yeah, there's something else
Yeah.
going on that, I can't say that I agree with everything you say, but I'm certainly very fascinated by the way you look at it and the thought you've put into it and the way you pass on your message. So, Dr. Joy, I think we've been speaking for 2.5 hours, in case you haven't noticed.
Well, my research involves so much. I mean, we could we could go on for hours and hours and
Sure.
hours because it encompasses so much. And it's important to me because I've tried to take pieces from every field of study, whether it be biotechnology, Tesla technology, cloning, ancient history, Sumerian history, biblical history, UFOs, fallen angels, I mean, demons. My research has, all my books have all this in it. And it all plays a part because it's the picture. Once you see the big picture, you can kind of see where we are and why this is happening. And the biggest thing is to tell you that you're just not a grain of sand, that some two things came together in a Big Bang theory and it doesn't really matter whether you exist or not. There's a reason why you are here.
Mm-hmm. I agree with
And
that 100%.
your most precious possession is this thing that lives inside of you, that now technology that people have experienced, that you can read about. I mean, and talk about it. That's the thing, is people won't talk about it. I get people in church go, I had this happen, but I don't want you to tell anybody that I'm telling you this. They're so afraid somebody's going to drive up in a paddy wagon and take them off. And that's why Satan has always had that availability to him, to keep it quiet.
Mm-hmm.
But if people start talking about it, like this UFO phenomena right now, I've been preaching about it forever. Now you got enough pilots out there, and they got enough video footage, and they got enough people like myself who's going, get up there and tell them what you're seeing. Tell them what's happening. Tell them what's going on. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of like not conspiracy theory anymore. Now it is, what is it? Why is it happening? And you start reading the Bible and you start hearing about the abyss opening up and these things with stingers in their tails, and that if flesh is not, if the time is not cut short, no flesh would even survive it. I mean, you can't go like not pay attention. Israel has been a nation. We voted to have Jerusalem as, the capital or whatever.
That's so scary. That's so scary.
But hey,
but so many
Trump
people
comes in and puts
it
in place.
Do you know what's so weird? When I was a kid, I was at this church. I can't remember. It was out somewhere in Eastern Ontario, and it was a church, and they were doing this revival thing, and all these people were coming. There was like hundreds of people there. And the guy said from his pulpit, he said, in your lifetime, the capital of Israel will be moved to Jerusalem, and that will signal to you that the end times are here. Okay? And I remember this preacher saying this. He was a fire and brimstone. He was a great speaker. And I remember thinking, this guy's crazy. This guy.
And now you saw it happen.
And I'm listening to this guy, and I'll never forget him say that the end times will begin. The beginning of the end will be whatever. I can't remember exactly, but he said, when the capital of Israel is moved to Jerusalem. And I've never forgotten that. Listen to that. And I was in my gym where I work out every day almost every day. And I have this, like, there's this area where they have TVs in the change room, and you can watch the TV, right? And I'm putting my underwear on one morning in the locker room, and I'm putting my pants on, and all of a sudden it's announced that Trump has approved the moving of the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and the
Oh
capital.
yeah.
And I remember I almost passed out, and I thought, oh my goodness, because there's a part of you that does not want to believe this. And I don't, actually. And I don't know if I do, Dr. Joy, but I really love talking to you. But it's so hard for me to think, could it really be so? Like,
Oh yeah.
it's like,
And the thing
I
about
don't
it is,
know, it's so wild.
okay. Another thing is, we know that
Like,
there's
think
going to
about,
be
I
a
was
peace plan.
told that by a preacher in some tent when I was a kid. And I
Yes.
remember being told that. And then in
Yes.
my lifetime, boom, it happens. And it's like, well, that's
And it
just a
happens
coincidence. That's just a coincidence, right? And that's just a coincidence.
Yeah.
And then you have this idea of global warming that's happening, or the climate change idea. And it's like, that is a really big problem if it's true. Like, I don't think, like, when we think about something like climate change, okay, and you
It's just
listen
a
to
nice
what,
term.
no, but think about what they're saying. They're saying
Yeah.
that humans are irrevocably destroying to the planet, that somehow in our lifetime, the world will become uninhabitable. And it will be because we were so wasteful and irresponsible and greedy, and we're blind to our evil blinded us to the point where we couldn't see how ridiculously polluting of the world we had become as a species. And it's like, all these messages were given to me in these crazy Protestant tents when I was a kid.
Years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people are saying, you will hear about environmental catastrophes that are beyond
right.
our ability to repair. And I'm like, that's
Yeah.
never going to happen. I'm 8 years old or whatever. I'm listening to this guy. And guess what?
Mhm.
Every single
happening.
day of my life, I am told, I'm not kidding you, I am told about climate change. And when people tell
Yes.
you about climate change, they're telling you about the end of days in their own way.
That's right. That's
There's-
right. It's like telling somebody that it's easier to say we've got aliens coming back to help us and saying, we got fallen angels riding around from the pits of hell.
Whatever you want to call it. Like, who cares what you want to call it?
It's just an easy way for people to deal with it. But now I've always said this. If they talk about climate change, study the sun, study Mars, study the other planets. It's happening on them as well. There's no people up there. It's not carbon related. What's causing the changes in the sun, moon, and stars? Because it's happening. So climate change, if it's because of us, then why is that happening on the sun? And why is this happening on Mars? And why is this happening on Venus? And they don't usually have an explanation for that. But it is.
It's, to me, this idea of the end of days. If people don't, whether you believe Dr. Joy's message of, in her books, we'll obviously tell everybody, we'll link to our website. Dr. Joy's books will be on the Amazon. You can click on the website and go and purchase her books and read more about it. But if you're not considering the end of days and you're an adult, rational person in 2019, you're not watching the news at all. Because right now, whether or not you believe in the resurrected Christ, or whether you're an atheist or whatever, if you're listening to this right now and Dr. Joy is saying that, look, these prophecies are being fulfilled or whatever, or you're watching CNN and you're hearing about climate change, something is going on. There's a global phenomenon that everybody knows is going on right now. And right in the next 20 years, the remaining 50% of humanity is going to go online. Everybody is going to be aware on the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Like, think about it. 50% of all humans have access to the internet right now. And they're talking about the other 50% gaining access to the internet within 2 decades or less. That is, whether or not you believe in John the Revelator on Patmos Island 2,000 years ago or not, There's something unique about this time in the world.
Yeah.
And but the world's always been ending, and the sky's been falling since Chicken Little. And what are you, Foxy Loxy or Ducky Lucky or Chicken Little? Okay, fine, I get that. But at the same token, there's a lot of weird stuff happening that's going to happen in the next 10 years. Dr. Joy, I just interviewed this futurist on my lighting show, and it's also available on my life show. And what he was telling me was that by 2040, the human brain is a supercomputer. So he says by 2040,
Yes.
we're going to have a computer which is as powerful as the human brain. And people think that that's not a big deal. That's an enormous, the powerful thing we have up there. And he said by 2060, with the trajectory we're on, we're going to have a computer that's more powerful than all the human brains put together. Things are happening so quickly right now in our society, and changes are happening so quickly that you have to consider the end of days. Whether you think about it that way or not, the fact of climate change, the idea of 9 billion people, the amount of hurricanes and earthquakes and wars and rebellions and the amount of weapons we have on earth, and how destructive they are, and the power of evil forces in the world has never been so high. Am I going? Do you agree with what I'm saying? It's just, I don't see how anyone could not reckon with this now.
Well, see, that's the thing that when I first started doing research, it was so here and there. But that's the thing, is that it's like a woman in travail. It's all come together with such intensity that the moment of birth is getting close. Because we can't change it. We can't go back the other way. We can't stop it. It's a train headed on a course, and we've been told what that course is, and we're following it. Like you said, whether you want to believe in John on the Isle of Patmos or not, the book of Revelation is spot on. And it was written over 2,000 years ago. And for it to be spot on, I've always said, God gave us a manual. We need to read it. Most people don't take the Bible and read it. They need to read it because it specifically is telling you that these are the end of days. And we're not telling stories about it. Like when I did my research, I was doing it to start off with because I wanted to know. I felt like my soul was unimportant. I wanted to know, why am I here? What's the purpose? What is all this about? I want to know. So I wasn't going to fool myself. When I looked at every aspect, from the UFOs to the fallen angels to all these crazy things that people used to laugh about, I looked at it because I wanted to know the truth. And so when I wrote my books, they were things that I wanted to know. So I wasn't trying to fool anybody. So your research that I've done is research that I wanted to know about it because I felt like my soul was that important. We are living in the end of days. We are living in the end of days. And it can't keep going like it is. Our oceans are dying. 21 beaches in Mississippi are closed. That algae thing, from satellite, they can see it. Lake Okeechobee was filled with it last year. It's only going to get worse. We are not going to make it out of here the way it is. And there's no turning back. And the only way to be on the safe side, and I was an athlete, I always want to win. So I want to play for the guy that's going to win. We know if we listen to the Bible, it's 100% accurate. And it says the guy that's going to win in the end is Jesus. So I kind of want to be on his team because I like winning. This 60, 70, 80 years of life, 90, 100 years on this earth, we can't even fathom, unless you look at the Hubble telescope and see forever and ever and ever, what eternity's like, but it's forever. And we are, there's something inside of us that has that potential to live like that forever. And I think, we celebrate birthdays, we celebrate this, and we never celebrate when somebody comes to Christ. I think that's the biggest celebration. That's the biggest choice you will ever make in your life, is whether you want to follow Jesus or you want to stay on this path straight to hell. It's a choice. You got to make it. Nobody can make it for you. It grieves me because there's people in my life that I love better than anything in the world that I've tried to preach and show them through science. If you don't want to believe the Bible, let me take these books like I write, because I got the science in there along with in fact, it's under science and religion, which people said, how do you sell a book like that? And I'm like, because everybody thinks it's supposed to be separated. They think you can't do one or the other. And I'm like, look, The Bible told us all the time it was like this. Science has proven it. Here's the research. You don't believe? In my books, I'll put the name of the person who said it, the book, the page. If you don't believe me, I'll give you where you can go find it. Because I'm an educator, because I am a researcher, I want you to have everything you need so that, I guess, kind of like an attorney. I presented my case. I try to fill every nook and cranny with every question you might have to help you find the answer, because it's that important. We're not talking about you're going to get a paycheck tomorrow or, get gas for your car. I'm talking about your soul.
Mm.
I'm talking about your soul.
So
An eternal thing that lives in you.
So if I can understand you, your message to people would be, forget about global warming, forget about everything else that's happening in the world. Save your soul. That's the answer.
Oh, yeah.
Save your soul.
Oh, yeah. Your soul is your most prized possession, asset, and it was created in God's image. I guess out of everything that we live and we have to deal with and the bad stuff and whatever, it's our soul that's the most important. There's nothing else in your life. Your children, there's nothing else in your life. Your children can't save you. You can't save your children. You can lead and you can guide. Your best friends, the same way. Your moms and dads, you can lead and guide and you can explain. You can take a horse to the water, but you can't make him drink. It comes down to the fact that we all have a choice in our life. And it's either to follow good or to follow bad. If you ride the fence, God's not going to have you. He makes it very clear.
Yeah,
you either choose him.
Lukewarm will be spat
out.
Lukewarm,
spat out, spew you out. Don't care if you've done if you gave $1 billion to help all the poor little orphans in the world.
That's the parable.
That will mean nothing.
That's the parable of the talents.
That's right. That will mean nothing.
The evil servant is cast out into the outer darkness, where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. It's interesting because that parable, nobody likes it. Christians hate that parable. Most Christians hate that parable because there's nothing worse than, to whom much is given, more will be given, and he shall have an abundance. But to him has nothing, even what he has will be taken away. So take the worthless servant and cast him to the out of darkness, where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. People don't like that. See, I send my kids to a private Christian school because the Catholic school system is very much in decline in some ways. And I don't like I'd rather have my kids in a completely public school or a separate school. I don't like hypocrisy. Double messaging people is very, very confusing. Either live amongst the evil or live amongst the good. But you can't live amongst the evil pretending that they are good. That's the worst, right? It's very confusing for people. But what was I going to say? So my kids are in Christian school. But what was it? I lost my train of thought. What was I talking about there? I wanted to ask you something. What was it about? Scott, remind me.
I don't know what's in your head.
Well, what was I talking about before I went to the Christian school thing? Catholic schools. Before that,
you were still on the talents.
Oh, the parable of the talents. That's right. So when the kids were graduating at grade 8, I've had 2 kids graduate from that school now, and all the people, you're supposed to pick a Bible verse, right? Mm-hmm. At each kid, and I've never once heard anyone use any of the words of Jesus. I find that most people try to avoid. A lot of Christians try to avoid him because he's actually not. He's not as he is portrayed in the general media. He's very. Mm-hmm. You talked about the parable of the bridesmaids and being locked out. That's a scary parable. Okay.
Oh yeah, the virgin parable is very scary.
Yeah, and you talked about I talked about the parable of the talents. Everybody wants the parable of the prodigal son, right? That's the one everybody loves. Yeah. And hey, I love that parable too. But you have to take it as a body of work. And the lukewarm get cast out.
I got somebody at my door.
We've almost done 3 hours. So why don't we call it and we'll say maybe we'll do it again. What do you think?
I've enjoyed so much the opportunity to do this because I love what I do.
And I can
And I
tell.
don't want and I'm willing to take the step outside of the box. I've been laughed at. I've been called crazy.
I bet.
When I first started doing this stuff on cloning, I had doctors go, and then the thing about it is now I have people call me and apologize. I've had people do radio shows and do a complete show apologizing to me years ago if I was on and they had made any kind of comment. It just goes back that when God gives you a direction in your life, and He gave me a direction, I'm not afraid to be laughed at. I'm not afraid to be called crazy because these things I have researched, I have seen, or I've experienced it. So I'm not afraid to stand and talk about it. Because if you don't, then people who have had these experiences who don't understand it, they will turn to other places to try to explain it. And unfortunately, that's usually down a rabbit hole, and they get further and further and further from God because somebody wasn't willing to stand up in the Christian community and say, look, there's a problem.
Mm.
Demons are real.
Yeah, I believe in evil 100%.
UFOs are real.
Yeah.
Near-death experiences are real. These kinds of things are happening. There's something in our head that is a transponder receiver. I mean, if you're not willing to stand
I
and
believe
say
you.
about it, nobody can learn.
You know what? You know what's weird? So, or not, you know what's actually so obvious to you, probably? How's that? It's going to be weird for other people to hear this, but it's going to be so obvious to you. So I've been a Christian my whole life. I'm going to be 42 in September. Been a Christian my whole life. But I never known what it meant to be a Christian until I consciously said in my mind and in my gut that I 100% believe in evil.
Oh,
Because
yes.
so many people refuse to believe in evil and refuse to believe that, their actions can be deeply malevolent and that there's a malevolent force inside them, like you said, trying to steal their soul and make them lose their souls, right? But everything has become so much clearer to me when I acknowledge the existence of evil and that it has an influence on me and that it can take me and use me for its purposes. So many people don't believe that.
Yeah, and that's the thing that Satan he's tried to play it where you don't think about it. And I think right now with the technology, he keeps you so busy that you don't have time to think about stuff really about you. You're so
Mm-hmm.
busy doing all this other stuff that you're not really thinking about your soul at all. And scripture is not something that people read. A long time ago, people didn't have books, so they read the Bible. They knew the
Mm-hmm.
Bible back and forward. They could quote you scriptures wherever,
Mm-hmm.
But then more books, more technology, more whatever. You get away from hearing and seeking God, and that's just what Satan wants. And he's done a good job. I mean, the way he's played the end of days to be able to bring a savior, and I mean, when you've got people of the top echelon of the world going, we need a savior. I think it was Rockefeller said that, whether he be saint or devil, we'll accept him because we need somebody to lead us.
Mm-hmm.
If the world gets in a mess, somebody's going to be looking for that person that's going to save them. They're willing to take a mark to be saved because they don't think life exists after. They just want to live now. So they're willing to take a mark because they want to live now. It's the perfect setup.
Isn't that
It's the perfect setup.
isn't that the fundamental basis of sin? It's the fundamental idea of sin. Like sometimes you say sin is missing the mark, like the translation of the word. But it's almost like sin is the true idea of sin, and the turning away from sin is the idea that there's a future that requires you not to engage in all these various temptations that Satan
Mhm.
offers you, whether that's sex,
That's
alcohol,
right.
stealing, hurting other people. But you're impelled to do these things. You're tempted. They're carnal pleasures in a sense. right? So it's
That's
like
right.
it feels good right now to do whatever sin it is. And I'm going to, but when it becomes a sin, when you knowingly do it and it compromises your future or it destroys
It
that's the
does.
soul destroying part of sin. Is like you
It
do
is.
it, you have the young man who engages in pornography and he
Mhm.
knows that it's unhealthy. Everybody knows that
It's not
pornography
healthy.
is not good for your soul. They can't prove that it's bad for you medically. Maybe they can, I don't know. But
Well, like
nobody
I
can
said a
come
while
to me
ago
and
about
tell me that pornography is a good thing. It's disgusting. It's the
right.
worst thing.
If you think about, like I mentioned, about the water of your body, remember I told you about
Mhm.
the
Yeah, sure.
plant and good things. If you engage in bad things, it's changing the water that's in your body,
I
which is
believe that.
actually destroying your cells
I
because your
agree.
cells are made out of water. So that water, the crystals become jagged in there. So yeah, it really is when you put things in your body, whether it be food, thought processes, or what you read or see, it is actually killing you.
Yeah,
It's a
for
slow
sure.
process. It's like the frog, like I told you, it's like the frog. It's
Yes.
slowly getting you.
Yeah, and it
Yeah,
envelops your soul, that kernel, and the light can't come out. And then you can see it in people. Their lamps are covered. There's no
that's
life in
right.
them anymore.
That's
Their
right. They
light
don't
is
laugh.
gone.
They don't smile. That's right.
No. It's funny. Uh, I know somebody that struggled with alcoholism, and this person ended up at an area of Toronto which is very poor, and he ended up at an AA meeting. And he said there was such an emptiness, and not that those people hadn't been able to stop and there wasn't hope there, but some of the people were so empty of life. Like the light
Yes,
couldn't come out of them anymore.
that's right. And the Bible tells us about that. That's going to happen. It's just that you become dead. There's
Mm,
no life. And it tells us that the living water is Jesus Christ.
mm.
I mean, you can't explain it any better to us. The living water is Jesus Christ, the water that we need in our body to keep our cells happy and healthy and whatever. And the future of our soul is the living water of Jesus Christ. It couldn't be told us. And now science is proving that because we know what the crystals look like when you put it in different things. I mean, the science behind it is absolutely proving what the Bible has told us all the time. A merry heart, happy heart does the body good. There's all these things that we've been told over
Sure.
and over, but it's really science is proving all that to be true, and it's an amazing thing, and I enjoy researching it and talking about it, and like I say, I just hope that people can grasp the enormity of what this is all about because it's not some simple little thing that doesn't matter. It's a very big picture with all of us engaging with each other as his children. And he doesn't want to lose any of us. That's the thing. He's trying to scream at the top of his lungs through the manual he gave us. Children, listen to me. Come to me. Believe in me. My way. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And nobody comes to the Father except through me. So he's trying to teach, he wants us to come home. He wants us to be the prodigal children. I mean, that's why it's there to show us that we all have been led astray by Satan. I mean, that's what it's after. He's after to show us the fun, the drugs, the pornography, the sex, the whole 9 yards. It's Satan's way of tempting us with his carrot. But the thing about it is, you got to stop and think. Your Father wants you to come home, and if you can turn around and give it up, what the future, I mean, like it's like I say, it's not like for a couple of years. You're talking about eternity. And sometimes, when I first started learning about this, we all have sins that we want to get away from. And, like eating or something like that, I would think if I wanted something, it was almost like I could sit there and hear Satan going like a snake. And I would think, do I really need that? Do I really need that milkshake? Because I would like, he's tempting me, and I've been working out. I really don't need that milkshake, but I would always, almost in my body, I would feel like this, hearing this thing go, like he's a
Mm,
rattle. You know what I'm saying? So if you
mm.
started, everything that you think is bad, that you know is bad, and your mind just go, it will make you not want it. You'll kind of go like, oh my gosh, it's him inside of that. And we
Mhm.
don't see that because we see it as good. Oh, it won't matter.
Mhm.
Everybody's doing it. It's not going to hurt me. Da 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 da. But the moment you turn it to where it really is, and you acknowledge it as not being good for you, and you hear that little rattle, then it'll change you very, very, very much.
Dr. Joy, where can people find your books?
You go to my website at www.drjoye, DRJOYE, joy with an E,
Joy with an E.
.com.
Okay.
Yeah, make sure you get it. Dr. Joye with an E, DRJOYE.com. And all my books are listed there, and you can click on the links and it'll take you right to where you can find them. Real simple.
Perfect. I'm going to thank you. It was an honor and a pleasure, actually. I wasn't sure how how this show was going to go, but we ended up speaking for almost 3 hours, and it was a real honor of mine. So I thank you, Dr. Joy, for coming
Well,
on
I
the show.
appreciate the opportunity to share my research and hope we will maybe get to do this again soon.
Me too. If you're out there listening to this and you want to start your own podcast or you want to create your own digital media, go to getagripstudios.com. Thank you for listening.